Hey everyone, it's Doc from Murder Was the Case. Very last minute live stream. You will probably jump in as you're learning it's happening, but there's obviously been a lot of Rex Human updates since I did the big 4 hour plus episode the Sunday before last. So just going to go over some other news that's come up. Chris Duett, who couldn't make it last time, yeah, he is the former host of Criminal Perspective, and he's here to discuss it. And Chris and I know a lot about serial killers, so we plan on just going through this news and then having a more or less easy conversation about it. And the geographic profiler, Doug Macgregor, is supposed to join us later. So, Chris, as I was saying to last time, it's like there hasn't been any big serial killer news since the Golden State Killer was caught. And I had a feeling at the time it was like, there's going to be all these DNA solves that are happening, and we're going to get all these people from the past, and then it moves slower than we thought. And I didn't see the LISK solve coming. I knew that eventually they'd get whoever was doing it, but there was no whisperings in my ear that it was about to happen.
Right. It caught me out of left field. I mean, this task force, as shitty as the investigation was, with the previous regime of sheriffs and what have you, they still managed to keep a lot of shit secret. You know what I'm saying? And it was to their benefit. And then this new task force and how they did things and did it through the grand jury and managed to. And then I wake up and see Long Island serial killer suspect arrested. I couldn't fucking believe it. But yeah, they did a really, really fucking good job.
Yeah, I agree. And they had about a year on it compared to the previous investigators. When you look, the evidence was all there. You have Amber Costello's boyfriend saying there's this ogre guy. He was like, 6'4", 6'5". He was driving this, was a green pickup truck?
Yeah.
Right? And then you have all the phones going dead in Massapequa Park. Now, there is a lot of information to correlate, but those are all strong pieces of information as far as I'm concerned. Those are things you'd want to push to the front. And so you should just go to Massapequa Park and look for a tall man with a green pickup truck. Now, that's going to take a very long time. It's not going to be something that you do in a week, but it's something that over time you want to be searching that area anyways. This is the whole point in getting witness testimonies, right? So, and you should be doing, you have a reason to go do door to doors. Everyone's like, this guy was strange, right? So one thing you can do is you go, hey, we're asking, some of the cell phones went dead around here. By the way, is there anyone who lives around here that you know of that is extremely tall and drives a pickup truck? You know what I mean? Like, it's just,
right.
You'd think it's basic police work.
Mm-hmm. So, a little anecdote that's similar to this and related. I want to say back in 2014, I believe it was, myself and Dr. Maurice Godwin we collaborated on a geographical profile for the Daytona Beach serial killer, and people who saw Josh Zeman, who's one of your guests last time, his series, The Killing Season, that was one of the cases that he profiled. Or went to check out and everything, and it was a case I was really interested. I'm not far from Daytona. I visited the scenes where they've found the bodies and did tons of research on this case and was obsessed with it. And so myself and Dr. Godwin, I compiled the data. Dr. Godwin put it into his software, and our anchor point after the Daytona Beach serial killer turned out to be Robert Hayes. He's now, I believe, convicted of, I can't remember, a couple murders at least at this point. He was linked to another murder in South Florida, and all the DNA matched up. Anyways, Robert Hayes was a criminal justice graduate at a historic Black college in Daytona Beach. And even still, he was very sloppy, and he was leaving tons of evidence at the scene, DNA, The women were raped and shot in the back of the head. One was shot, I believe, in the forehead. She probably, turned around. Robert Hayes, the criminal justice major, he left shell casings, he left tire impressions. They managed to find the tires. I think they knew what kind of car he drove. So when we made that profile, we offered it to people investigating the case. They said, no, thank you, we're good, all good and well. But years later, when the case was actually solved, our profile was, I believe, it was less than a mile, it was very, very close to where he was living at the time, Robert Hayes. And Dr. Godwin said, hey, if they had taken this profile and searched, this anchor point area for this type of vehicle, who knows? So it's the same. And that's the exact same thing. They didn't have the boxes for Rex Heuermann. They had the one in Manhattan for the cell phones and the one in Massapequa. And because I guess they didn't have the box and the car together, they didn't know exactly where to look or something, but there's something there with that, and then eventually it fell into place.
Yeah, I'm just thinking though, if all the cells are going dead in Massapequa Park, that's the place where they're most likely encountering the attacker, and there's a chance that that's where they're being attacked, right? Because even if he encounters them there and takes them elsewhere, they're going to leave their phones on.
Right.
So the phones are going dead there. That's, to me, the point of attack. So if it's consistently happening in that area, then that's the strongest area that you should look for. Then you have the description of the vehicle and the offender. Yeah, people are down on profiling lately, which is fine because it was way too overblown at first, right?
Right.
It's very cool. Like, I mean, the idea of a profiler is really exciting. The reality of it is it's less impressive, but it's not just guesswork. A lot of people think it's just guesswork. Some people, it might be guesswork, but I'll give you an example. In the Heuermann case, you have the victims are left in this area, which is known for duck hunting, and they have these burlap camouflage fabrics put over them to obfuscate them. So if you go duck hunting area and then you have the camouflage burlap, which is used in hunting, to then go, well, both those things seem to indicate someone who's a duck hunter. Doesn't mean he has to be a duck hunter, but it's reasonable to think that a duck hunter might have done this. Then you'd be right. The issue is you need to be working with the accurate information. So everyone thought it was burlap sacks, including the FBI, apparently. Because I looked in this, like the FBI profile had burlap sacks in it. I'm like, but they weren't burlap sacks. So did the FBI do a profile without receiving adequate information from the police? And I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be either.
Yeah. But you can't do that. You can't work on like seriously formulating a profile and giving it to the police if you don't know for a fact that you're getting accurate information.
So, and just to go a little deeper into that, the slightest detail can shift the fuck out of a profile,
right?
And that's why you're driving this point home, because it's important, and that's why.
Yes, exactly. And even just the way things are sometimes worded in a newspaper or a book can lead you to think that the events transpired in a way that it didn't. You went, oh, well, look, of course I thought it was that, because it sounds that way. So that's really, if you're going to submit a profile to the police, you have to be working in conjunction with the police. You have to have a relationship where you can go back and forth with them and saying, like, okay, I don't understand this part, or I need more information here.
I think this thing was doomed fuck from the jump as far as profiling goes, because you have no clear pattern of victimology. You don't know which victims are his. So we've really, like, we have an idea of possibilities of how he might have been behaving and whatnot, or things that would be indicative of certain, but I don't know, man.
Well, I mean, might be a good time to get on to. Last time I did the live stream, we didn't talk about the eastbound stranglings. And so, because this brings up a situation here where now we know we know Rex Heuermann has been charged with it, and he's, if guilty, he will be guilty of the three Amber Costello, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman. He hasn't been charged with the fourth victim yet,
Maureen Brainerd
Brainerd
Barnes.
Barnes. That was a mistake. My guest last time, Robert O'Tone, said that he had been, and he had been just like right about the time we were going on. So I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I was getting ready, but turns out that he wasn't. But
and mistakes happen. Information's coming in on the fly, and mistakes happen. And,
yeah, of course, nothing malicious about it. Just I need to clarify it though, right?
Right.
But I mean, look, if he did those three, one would think it's. I'm trying to phrase this in a way where it's legal. I think he did all four, and I think that's fairly obvious. Although he might not have done any because he's been just charged.
I mean, let's just say allegedly. Let's blanket all of this with the word allegedly.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? If he's good for those three, then that fourth, there's no doubt.
Yeah, and I mean that's come on. So she's in. Maureen Brainerd Barnes is mentioned in the indictment. You know, it's coming. For whatever reason, they may not have whatever they need that they would feel secure with gaining a conviction at that point. Because who knows? I believe she might have been before the other three that
she
he
was
is being charged.
She was,
okay.
Yes.
So maybe more deterioration, less evidence around. Who knows? But I can't imagine that he's not eventually going to get charged with that murder.
Yeah, she disappeared on July the 29th, 2007.
Right.
And that was before Melissa Barthelemy was in 2009.
And
so
the others were 2010?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's for technical reasons like that. Maybe the scientific evidence isn't there. They need to do a little bit more. Maybe they're on to whatever burner he used or something, or who knows. But they seem to be confident that he'll be charged with it.
And what's the rush, right? They've got him behind bars. He can't hurt anyone if he is LISK, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now they can take their time and really build the Brainerd Barnes case. Because what if something falls through with the other three? Probably won't, but you want to make sure that. Actually, that brings up a good question. Are they trying him for all of the murders in one, or separately? That's one thing I haven't thought about. Probably in one, right?
I would think they would charge him in one, but I mean, is she going to be added to that? Is that, I mean,
right?
Who knows how the process is going to play out?
I don't know how they make those decisions. Yeah,
I don't either. I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be. So,
so Eastbound Stranglings, they happened in 2006. So what happened is you have two women walking in a marsh behind a row of motels in Atlantic City, New Jersey. They stumbled upon the remains of Kim Raffo, 35 years old. And then the police arrived to process that, and they discovered three more women in the same pit: Tracy Ann Roberts, 23, Barbara Bridor, 42, and Molly Diltz, 19. They were all believed to be sex workers, and they were posed in the same direction, face down in filthy water and barefoot. So immediately you're like, well, there's a cluster of four. They're all of the same profession and ethnicity and gender as the victims for which Huerman has been charged. So it's very tempting to go, and you can get to Atlantic City quite quickly and easily. So it's tempting to go, what's Huerman? And he had the place in Vegas, and so he must have liked gambling too. And I'll get to this down the line. He was seen in Atlantic City. So he must have done it. And it's like, yeah, he very well could have done it. But then what are the differences here? Do we know how Barthelemy, Waterman, Brainerd Barnes, and Costello were killed?
I want to say strangulation, but I can't tell you if this is manual ligature. If we know he was into bondage and tying.
Yes, you'd think it's strangulation. He's a sex sadist, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be strangulation or stabbing, probably.
Yeah.
So, assuming that's strangulation, It's strange that detail hasn't got out yet, or did we just miss it? I don't think we would have missed it, but I have a sense that it's strangling. Yeah.
Yeah, I maybe I don't know. I can't tell you honestly if their deaths were ruled homicide by strangulation. Honestly, I think it was ruled, and anybody can correct me in any format. I'm checking Twitter and whatnot, so hold me
Right.
to the fire. Um, I think it was just maybe death by homicidal means,
Hmm.
something like that. But I honestly, I'm not 100% sure on it.
Well, that's where you want to link, right? So if you've got these eastbound stranglings, well, if you've got another cluster of 4 people with all of those similarities and they're all strangled, then that's looking pretty good. Now, with the New Jersey cluster, you have, according to what I read, they're all barefoot. Is
Mhm.
that true of the Long Island cluster? I haven't heard that, but
It's a good question.
yeah, because you're looking for the similarities there. Because like, look with what's the Manorville Butcher, I believe was the name they
Mhm.
gave to John Bitroff, who was convicted of murders that preceded the Long Island serial killings.
I believe so, or either
Yeah.
maybe the Manorville butcher cases are still,
Yeah.
some of those ones are unsolved, and I don't know.
But they
It
were
did,
dismemberment murders of sex
right.
workers on
Hmm.
Long Island, right? And so if you looked at that and you looked at some of the victims in the LISK case, because there's some that haven't that Human hasn't been charged with that involved dismemberment and for which Bitroff was not convicted, right? So it's easy to say, well, those must be Bitroff if you didn't know about Human. So it's it's very easy to attribute all of these things to one perpetrator when you know about that one perpetrator, rather than, I think, which is the more troubling issue, is that you have, and all throughout history you've had this, multiple serial offenders that prey on this demographic.
Hmm. Um, I still lean towards that. I mean, is it possible for all the LISK victims to be attributed to Huerman? Yeah, it's totally possible.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Including this eastbound stranglings.
so
Yeah, it's
is
possible. Yeah.
it's possible. It is possible. I Me personally, I don't know about that one,
Yeah.
but if it comes out and they say, hey, we've got some of Huerman's DNA that we had collected off of one of the victims back when we were, I would be like, oh, there you go. But there's just I don't know. I'm not feeling that. Um, yeah, but
Right.
as far as the other LISK victims, you have the earlier ones were dismembered. A common thing that I've heard about dismemberment is how unbelievably fucking messy it is. Like terribly messy, horrible inconvenience. And then and as far as dumping, they like to put them where they're comfortable in areas that they're more comfortable. And with Huerman, he could have easily put him in water, but he
Mm.
didn't want to. He didn't want to. He didn't want to discard their bodies. He wanted their bodies to be accessible to him, and
Yeah.
so that kind of is that the link, because they're
Well,
all accessible in a way. I mean, it's very it's
Well,
open
let's
ended for sure.
let's first welcome Doug Macgregor, geographic profiler, joining us. Just moving house, so thanks for jumping in, Doug.
No worries. How's it going, Chris?
Did I throw
What's
you
up,
one too
Doug?
early?
Not much,
Sorry.
man. Lee, how you doing? No, I'm good.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm good. It's you know, it's good to have something to talk about. I was saying to Chris that the true crime thing was kind of flat for a lot of years, and particularly when it's good news that there's been, an arrest in this case. Getting off what you were saying, Chris, I mean, there is that type of guy, right? The cluster grave guy.
Mhm.
John Robinson comes to mind. Bodies in the barrel in, was it Kansas and Missouri? He was a very control focused offender. Bundy had clusters. Ridgway, Ivan Milat had, but that I don't know if he had. He didn't have multiple victims from multiple events, though. Doug, you know that, right? They weren't all in the exact same area with Milat.
Yeah, Ivan Milat, he did have 7. The 7 known victims were all in the same area. They were all in Belanglo National Forest.
Yeah, but they weren't like a tightly packed cluster. It was they're a few miles apart, right?
I wouldn't say miles.
Well,
I would
really.
say maybe a mile. They were spread out
Mm.
over maybe a mile. I can't remember exactly. There were 3 pairs there, and then one individual. And then there were 3 other victims, which are which I identified as probably Ivan Milat's, and which one of them law enforcement's pretty sure is Ivan Milat's, but hasn't been that hasn't been confirmed.
Okay, so there is this control type offender that does the clustering, and I think there's this idea that he's not done with them. It could be necrophilic, or it could be just reminiscing, or it could just be wanting to always come back and check that, oh, no one's found my things yet, right? But there's a sense of, it's very different than the offender who just throws somebody out of a car as they're going past, like pull over, throw the body out of the car, and go. It is beside the road, but it's not quite like that. There's more care with it, and they're placed too close to each other.
I wonder about with the disposals. So we have the Gilgo 4 wrapped in camo burlap. All of this is practical for hiding a body, you know. But the bondages were still on the bodies, and some of the other ones had identifying jewelry, and so and I don't think somebody like Hewerman would leave something like jewelry behind. Like, this dude is so fucking into this shit, you know, like he wants it all.
And the burlap is just practical for transportation too. You know, garbage bags rip. Burlap.
Okay, but hold
tough,
on.
right?
Are we still not understanding? My understanding was these were not bags.
Well,
These
they were strips, yeah.
Strips. So it's practical for camouflaging the body,
concealing the bodies.
It's a defensive. It's an MO act, yeah. But yeah. So it is still practical, yeah. But I mean, with also being so close to his house, like, do we really think that he didn't drive out there? Or if you had to put money, of course he did. He drove out there and stood there, and he felt, you know, I'm in their presence. And maybe with the duck hunting, here's another thing. That's practical too, because he has a reason to be going around in the bush. And so if they find him in that area, what are you doing? I'm hunting, right? But then, okay, so we don't know, but could this go necrophilia?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not feeling that. I think so. I've had a lot of sexual sadists. William Clyde Gibson, he stood out the most because he was so descriptive about it. And I asked him if he ever. So William Clyde Gibson is a serial killer out of Indiana, for those listening who don't know, and he was a sexual sadist who tortured his victims. One of his victims was an elderly woman that he was friends with his mother. He knew growing up. He sexually assaulted her. He broke her back. It was just brutal murder. Like, it's really gnarly shit. And he murdered 3 women. He's currently on death row in Indiana. I started communicating with him about 2 weeks after he was arrested. He seemed to be broken because he just said, you know, like, I don't give a fuck. You know, like, basically, like, I'm a sick dude. I did this. Something's wrong with me. But I had asked him why he was so free flowing with information. And so early on, I mean, this is before, you know, he probably had his first appearance, and he's facing the death penalty. And he's just like, yeah, this is what I did. But I asked him if he ever visited the bodies. He had one buried in his backyard. And he told me that sometimes it was hard not to. And then you have Robert Yates, who another same things. I didn't know that I'd classify him as a sexual sadist, but he's definitely
he's a necrophile.
Thank you, a necrophile, and definitely a fucking sexual serial killer, psychopath, what have you. A lot of things shared with a serial killer like Hewerman. Same thing, buried a body outside of his bedroom window in his backyard, and same thing, like, he wanted to get rid of the bodies. He didn't want to keep them around, but he put them in places that he knew those places. So if he visited those places, all of that's conjoined. So
you even get like the Moors murderers that are very different serial killers, right? From Manchester in the 60s. And they would go and they would camp on the moors around or allegedly on top of where they had buried their victims. So it's not direct necrophilic contact with the victim, but there's a sense of like, we are here in this place with the person that we victimized. So it doesn't always have to be as blatant as post-mortem sex acts, but this idea of like a special place.
I wonder if for Hewerman it was if there was an element of like a further insult. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna come visit your friend because he said in a phone call, "Your sister's a whore. I'm going to watch her rot."
Well, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go to this comment here from Kim Cooper Caltagirone. She said, I think they said at the press conference yesterday they would only say death by homicide. News commentator said Decomp was keeping them from saying the manner of death for certain. Also, the DA said the Go-Go-4 were missing articles of clothing, but he would commit to what articles were missing. Well, then I'm going to go with, if I have to place my bets, I'm going to go with strangulation or suffocation, because Decomp doesn't erode bones. And so if you have 4 people that are stabbed, there's going to be some nicks or something on the bones there. If it's blunt force trauma, the bones are going to be crushed or broken. And if it's gunshot, it's also going to affect the bones. So we don't know for certain, but that's the most likely scenario given what's just described there. Thoughts?
Doug?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Just a couple things there. The articles of clothing, when it comes to, these kind of crimes against sex workers, I'd be more surprised if they were clothed. Because then the offender likely put the clothes back on because there was a sex act performed prior to. So, generally speaking, they're going to be missing articles of clothing. The strangulation also kind of ties in with that because it's more intimate, more personal. So it could be, part of the sex act that, that gratifies him. So.
Yeah, that is a good point. I thought that they did have some clothes on. I thought I'd heard that somewhere.
Yeah, I think she said that there was pieces of clothing missing. So
there's so many.
Yeah.
Was it like 10 victims, 11? I mean, it's hard to keep up with who had what, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
you're stuck in the hyperreal deluge of information, which is the internet, and you're trying to get everything straight while remembering stuff. But
yeah.
So I don't know. With that, then I think for the Eastbound Stranglings, without forensic evidence, it's going to be you're going to need forensic evidence to tie them to him. They've seen him in Atlantic City. He did go there. The MO and of what we know of the signature components, because they might be still holding that back, right? Is seems to be similar. But then again, it's strangling sex workers, right? It's not an exotic. It's not like decapitations or something more exotic. It's for the in sexual homicide, it's fairly standard. Forgive the crass phrasing of that, but you know what I mean, right?
So there's a few things about this so I think the women and if I'm wrong, please, anybody feel free to correct me. I think the women went missing from around the Black Horse Pike area where their bodies were found. I think that's the stroll for the sex workers around there. If that's the case, so Rex Hewerman, I don't think strolled like shitty areas. He seemed
he used call girls. He did everything remotely.
Yeah, and he was meeting them. I think 2 of them were at a Grand Central Station or something like that in Manhattan, a terminal of some sort. maybe I want to say it just doesn't seem likely that he's trolling shitty areas, a well-to-do,
Right.
trolling these shitty areas um, for these women to kill, and then was he taking them to one of the sleazy hotels, motels there, and killing them there, and then why dump him there? Is it strictly, would it be out of convenience? Because if he's not
Yeah.
staying long and he's not visiting these ones and he's not, it just doesn't, I don't know.
Well, the others were so the ones he was charged with were killed when his wife and family were out of town.
Right.
Right. So maybe in 2006 they're not out of town, and he's so he has to use like a more crude MO, right? He has less control over his circumstances. He's moving away from home. He's going out to Atlantic City and just doing. I know what you're saying though. It's a reason
Mhm.
to say
Yeah.
potentially not. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, like he dumped them in a sewer ditch. Not as secluded. I mean, look at Gilgo Beach. Nobody's fucking going back there unless, you're Rex Hewerman.
Mm.
I think Josh said that the sticky briar plants were like 6
Yeah,
feet.
impassable.
Yeah. It sounds very unfriendly, a super unfriendly environment. And the Atlantic City murders was just right behind a motel, much more accessible. Still, it's off the beaten path, but he's right off the road right there. And like you said, Lee, it's the possibilities definitely. I mean, sure, anything's possible, but
Okay,
there's
but
just
not
a lot of,
probable at this point. We can't say that it's probable.
to me personally, no, I wouldn't lean on probability that Rex Hewerman is the Eastbound Strangler.
For myself with the Eastbound Strangler, again, it's too early to tell. There's not enough information yet, but there's when I look at it, there's not a whole lot right now publicly that's tying him to Atlantic City. I mean, sure, he's been there, and I guess one of the one of the victims was last seen in Atlantic City. I'm not sure if it was it Jessica Taylor? I can't remember. One of the girls was last seen in Atlantic City. But the two reasons that I don't like him for this at the moment is one, as Chris mentioned, the hotel, the Golden Key Motel. He doesn't have control there. There's surveillance, human surveillance, maybe physical surveillance, and it's not an area that he controls. So that's one reason. The other reason is that the victim's facing east. That's posing, possible signature, and there could be a heavy religious component there. I'm not sure if Hiraman was religious, but I'm not a religious person per se. But just a quick Google search, it's from the second coming, the Garden of Eden, where life begins, everything facing east. And so we don't see
That's
Mm-hmm.
that,
interesting.
or it hasn't been identified or at least made public in these other cases.
I think honestly, maybe it's could just be the setup of the scene and how he managed to toss the bodies, whatever was more convenient for him to unload them. He doesn't want to get caught hanging out fucking back there, I mean, so
It
the
could be,
East,
yeah, like something like if you're always dragging them by their arms, then they're always being taken to the scene in a certain way, and then when you set them down, they will all just happen to be facing east.
right.
Unless you
Could be
manipulate them in such a way to, yeah.
And then, and as far as I know, they were in a ditch that he would have had to get in the ditch and get wet if he was to bring them over there. I think, so you could be talking about a bigger dude who's kind of throwing them or slinging them in there. And because of how he's tossing them, they're landing the same way. Who knows?
A bigger
I mean,
dude like 6'4", right?
possibly. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, to be determined. You know which one I think he's not good for? This murder here, or it's not even a murder. Last time I checked, it's just a missing person. 18-year-old Alia Hill from Rock Hill, South Carolina, just 20 miles from the vacant lots there owned by Rex Hewerman. Was reported missing in November 2014. So, from what I read, not a call girl, right? We don't have a murder scene. The only thing that seems to be is that it's somebody who was an attractive female who disappeared around where Huerman had property. I think that's a reach. Yeah, you want to look into it, but I don't even know how you go about looking into it when you don't have a body other than asking him.
I mean, do they plan on combing the entire property specifically for evidence for this? I mean, and what would they be looking for? It's just like you said, it's a reach. And as far as we know, like let's put this on the four, on the Gilgo Beach four. Rex Huerman had a type. He had a preference.
Petite, yeah,
right, and
very
we
petite,
don't,
under 5 feet tall.
as far as we know, he was. I mean, that's all of the victims match that profile. So did he stray from that? If he did, what to? You know, like what was he? There, the more we learn about this, the more we can start to kind of dig deeper into certain things or push other things away, I think. But just right off the bat, looking at this one, of course, possibility, but I'm not feeling it too terribly much.
Yeah, I mean, also, I think we talked off air. I mean, this is a black victim. None of the 3 victims for which she was charged are black, and Brainerd Barnes isn't black either. I think there's some black victims in the earlier dismemberment murders. You did, however, point out that some of the pornography searches were for black people.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe it was 10-year-old chubby black girl he did a Google search for.
So specific, it's strange.
Very, very. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's so the petite victims are clearly the ones he liked to kill, but that's not the only thing he was into. So again, this one's, who knows?
Okay, so then we have obviously, and we found out now he's got a timeshare in Vegas, and they bring this portrait out of his house of a blonde woman whose face is all beat up, and somebody makes the link to Lindsay Marie Harris, the 21-year-old Las Vegas escort who advertised on Craigslist. Remember when the LISK was the Craigslist killer?
Mm-hmm.
One of many Craigslist killers throughout the early
2000s. Like one of 3, I think.
Yeah. The funny thing is, like, at the end of the day, there was like no Craigslist killer because there were so many people who were called Craigslist killer and it just didn't stick. Because then there was a Craigslist killer next week, so we were just like, "There's no Craigslist killer," right?
Yeah, everybody's a Craigslist killer these days.
Yeah, but LISK was initially associated with that.
Right.
She was last seen on May 4th, 2005, and on May 23rd of that year, kids found her dismembered legs while playing next to the I-55 in Divernon, Illinois. Okay, so then the argument is, well, that does make sense if she's abducted in Vegas and then he drops her halfway on his way back to New York. I understand why they want to look, but let's be honest, that portrait of the battered blonde woman could look like any battered blonde woman. It only looks like her in that the face is symmetrical and the hair is long and blonde, but that is such a ubiquitous image anyway, right?
So to tie another serial killer's behavior to kind of show that there is something to this, well, not to show that there's something between this particular victim and Huerman, but to show that maybe what was going on with the battered woman. There's a serial killer down here in Florida named Charlie Brandt, and
Right.
he committed suicide after he murdered his wife and his niece. The wife was to get her out of the way so that he could do what he wanted with the niece, because the niece was his like real object of affection. And after he killed her, he went into her garage and he hanged himself. Brandt dismembered her. And Brandt was a fisherman. He was good with a knife. And I believe that these dismemberments were precise. and there's multiple women, but he removed their hearts. The murders that he's known for, there's dismemberment involved, things like that. On the back of his door in his bedroom, I believe, there is a like an anatomical woman where you can see the insides, the muscles, all the
Right.
structure, and her hair is in a bun, and it's very strange. But I think it's really telling, and I think that's the same with Heuermann. I think it's just one of those telling things.
Well, his porn searches are a lot about people crying and being beat up, women being
Yeah.
crying and being beat up. So, um, just what I'm saying though is that, of course, they've got to look into him for this. But if I was betting, I would say no, because she only resembles the portrait because the portrait resembles so many women.
Yeah, I think it's the general image.
Yeah.
It's not. I think it's good that people are trying to establish these things, and they're actually looking for victims who need their cases solved, and that's something, and that's good. But yeah, I think maybe the battered woman image might be a more general thing that that's Rex Heuermann's
Yeah.
girl in a bikini on a motorcycle. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, so yeah.
I don't think that it's an innocent thing that painting is there. The same way I don't think the child-sized doll is, personally. I think those are both showing us his sexual desires. I mean, what's a
Right.
pervert going to have art of, right? It's not going to be something aspiring. It's not going to be self-affirming, higher Apollyon art. It's going to be just hedonistic, something to beat off to, basically, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so yeah, that's what he has in his house. Of course he does. I'm just saying that I think that resemblance to her is because it resembles so many um, standard looking blonde women. But yeah, let's say he did do that. What if he is responsible for Lindsay Harris? Then there's this dismemberment part of it, which then makes me much more confident that he could be responsible for the earlier LISK killings.
But let's go back to dismemberment. Like Messi, where's he staying? In a hotel in Vegas? Did he bring a tool to dismember somebody specific?
Right.
Like what is going on?
Well,
So
did he have the timeshare then? That's the first thing you got to ask.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and I mean, is that timeshare environment conducive to bringing a prostitute there, killing her in a manner that he wants to be satisfactory, even if it doesn't go as planned, and he strangles her and he doesn't get to torture her, whatever his deal is, whatever it is. This is just me talking, giving ideas, but
Yeah.
who knows that environment is conducive to that? I mean, we don't know. The walls might be paper thin there, and it's
Seems risky.
yeah, super
Yeah.
risky.
Yeah. What do you think, Doug? That's a hell of a distance for to cover. What is the geographic profiling perspective on that?
For Vegas specifically,
Well,
or for
abducted or just last seen in Vegas,
yeah,
legs found in Illinois, and possible offender in New York. Seems like a stretch to me.
yeah, I think it's. I mean, they have a lot of places and victims to look into here. Um, I mean, just in the dismemberment, just talking about dismemberment for a minute, most cases that I look at that have dismemberment is for a practical reason. It's for transport. It's easier to move pieces of a body out of a hotel, or it's easier to out of a car if it's in pieces, right? So, I mean, there's other reasons that obviously offenders dismember, but most of the time, most of the cases I look at, it's for practical reason. Um, in terms of where Heuermann has been, they have so many to look at. Like, I just did a quick search, and for example, his mother for the last 4 years has lived in Chenango Forks, New York. And a quick search there shows 2 women were found drowned in the river in Chenango
Right.
River. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're at all related, but my point is that every place he's been, whether his relatives, Victoria, Elizabeth, his mother, father, who died quite some time ago, but all these properties, all these places, there's a lot to unravel.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that you do have to have some sort of discipline with this too, because you could end up saying, well, potentially everyone in the United States is a victim of Rex Heuermann. You have to prioritize the suspects depending on certain criteria and look for that. But so while we're on the topic of him um, offending in different places, Doug, didn't you find, because I haven't seen this in the news, but when we were doing the last live stream, Doug, you found that he had a place in New Jersey, and then Peter Vronsky said, "Oh, I've got him in Massachusetts." I'm like, so what
The
happened to those?
Yeah, the Massachusetts property I have on here as well on my map. It's I didn't find it under his name. I found it under Victoria's name, who I believe is his daughter.
Oh,
Um, I can pull it up for 1 second here.
sure. Yeah.
Let's see.
Do you have a slide? I can throw it up here if you got a PDF.
I'd have to create it. So the Massachusetts one is Victoria in Newton, Massachusetts. So she was registered there to that address in January 2021. So I'm not sure exactly how long she was there beforehand. And then the New Jersey address, several of their family members were registered to that address, which is Huron Road, North Brunswick Township in New Jersey.
Right. That's once again, that's where he got married.
Yeah, there's also another
the first time.
Right, and there's also another New Jersey address in Flemington, Forest Drive as well.
So,
which Elizabeth was registered to. So there's several addresses there.
Okay. So
they're quite some distance from Atlantic City, though.
Yeah, and that's family. So we don't know that they belong to Rex Heuermann ever.
He was registered to the Huron Road address at one point. Yeah.
Oh wow! Do we know when?
1990 to 2023. So he's always had that address.
Why is that on the news then?
Don't know. Maybe they're just
because that's New Jersey.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm going off of public databases, right? So the police law enforcement may have more accurate information in there that they're able to search, but those are the dates that I have just doing public searches.
Okay, so yeah, we've talked about Heuermann being in New Jersey, and so a dancer at Stiletto, which is on the boardwalk, I think, of Atlantic City, so it's a strip club, believes she may have seen Heuermann 3 times, twice before the pandemic and once more in 2021. All 3 times he paid for a private room but declined a lap dance. Quote, "He just wanted me to sit and talk with him, and then he would keep persuading me to meet him outside of the club, and I never went. I've met most people outside of the club before, so I'm no stranger to it, but this guy made me feel uncomfortable." End quote. She said she believes he left her alone after the 3rd visit because she gained weight following the birth of her 2nd child. Quote, "I do know I did see him on Tinder too." End quote. And a parking attendant next door said he recognized Heuermann as an infrequent visitor to the club. So did the clerks of several stores on the boardwalk nearby.
It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So he's coming and going from Atlantic City, and unless everyone now has a Rex Heuermann story, because that's the hot thing to talk about, right? And that's the problem with all of these things that are coming out now. I can't read any of it and just go, oh, that seems credible, because it just seems like you would have any number of attention seekers or confused people now that could be coming out making these claims. At the same time, you don't want to dismiss them.
Yeah, it's tough. The most recent case that it just comes to memory with that happening is the Brian Laundrie case. After
that Gabby Petito,
exactly. Everybody saw Brian Laundrie everywhere.
Right.
People were hiking in forests, going to different parks, trying to find this guy, and it's just which ones are actually credible, who's actually seeing him, and yeah.
I think with Heuermann, now that they're finding all these properties all over the place, they might give him the Israel Keyes treatment and try to, track the travel records, all the finances. I don't know if they go as far to make it public to try to generate tips, but I mean, who knows, man? I mean, now that we're finding these properties and that he was, interstate, not necessarily as a serial killer, but I mean, he, got around and had these places and, yeah, I don't know, man.
The thing with the properties is that we're at such an infant stage right now because everyone's just picking out Rex Heuermann's properties.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, his father had a property in Virginia, and for a long time, I'm not sure, it might still be under their name. It says online it is, but it may or may not. I don't know. And when I do my geographic profiles, there's an element of OSINT there, that open source intelligence, that you have to not only find the offender, the properties they're related to, but all their anchor points, which is their family. And
Yeah.
I've mapped out his immediate family, but maybe he was close with a cousin, an uncle. Maybe I haven't even gotten into his friends. I don't even know who they are. So maybe he has a best friend.
They're all imaginary, dude.
Yeah, maybe. But
Yeah.
my point is that there's so many anchor points that this guy could have that he frequented, and we just have no idea yet.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of this one? Former escort Nicole Brass, 34, says she went out with Rex Heuermann 8 years ago. Quote, at the time I was in my early 20s and I was an addict and I wasn't really thinking about safety, end quote. She connected with Heuermann through an escort website and went to the Steam Room seafood restaurant in Port Jefferson with him. Heuermann initially wanted to rent a hotel room for them in Nassau County, but she did not feel comfortable meeting him in private, so she convinced him to take her out to dinner instead. Quote, in the beginning, he seemed totally normal. He talked about his job until he brought up the Gilgo Beach murders. Before that, they talked briefly about famous serial killers, according to her. The woman claimed Heuermann mentioned details about the killings that she had not heard and that she followed the case. Quote, it seemed like somebody who really wanted to brag about what they did, but couldn't. Something about his body language changed. The look in his eyes changed, and it seemed like talking about the victims was enjoyable for him. Brass got, quote, the worst gut feeling and became, quote, so scared. Quote, he was like, leave your car, come to mine. He was very adamant about me leaving my car. Looking back, he didn't want to have to kill somebody and get rid of their car. I'm a felon and had a history and didn't want to get involved with cops. I think he went after girls who were addicts or had a record or anyone less likely to talk to police. When she learned of his arrest, quote, I was also like, holy shit, I was right. Maybe I should have spoken to the cops, but I knew they wouldn't listen to me. End quote.
So there's a few things about that stand out to me. And that would be, he seems to disarm them first, or attempt to, before, he either can't hide his creepiness anymore and it just kind of starts seeping out when he's got to ask him about the Long Island serial killer or whatever. But it doesn't seem like he's just picking him up and getting him in his car or whatever. And this is another thing, I guess, another knock against Atlantic City. He seems to kind of disarm him first. And I'm not sure if you saw the interview he did with the French documentary or whatever that was, but
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. He's nothing to worry about. And he presents himself that way. And I think he probably did that to them, disarmed him. And then that way it was, easier to attack them. Another thing is he keeps talking, but this is the second story I've heard of an interaction with him by a female where he brings up the Long Island serial killer, like you said, kind of wanting to brag, but not really. I do agree with that 100%. And talking about other serial killers, I used to talk to Philip Jablonski, who was also a very sexual sadist serial killer. And he told me that he followed other serial killers, and specifically the ones he would name. I would say, what is it about them that you like? And he said they got away with it for so long because he was very sloppy, disorganized, was caught rather quickly. Was kind of spree-ish, but a serial killer.
He seemed unstable, Jablonski, to me. He's not exactly an organized killer.
He's not somebody that can function in society ever. He just doesn't have it. didn't have it in him.
Yeah.
But he admired the serial killers who could get away with it for a long time and things like that. And he did, you know, he was a student of the game. I think Rex Heuermann was a student of the game as well, bringing up, you know, serial killers with these women and things like that. Just another, you know, observation. Like he lived and breathed this shit, you know, like this was it. And I think he tried to keep it cool until, you know, he had it planned out. He had a method. And that's, I think, possibly his method might have been to disarm them, and then, you know, Rex Heuermann gets nasty.
Well, with this stripper then in Jersey saying he wanted a room, but he just wanted to talk to me, he didn't want a lap dance. With what you just said, that actually seems credible now, or more credible, because it seems like the kind of thing you want to do.
It's definitely what I lean towards with Heuermann, you know.
I understand maybe if you're getting an escort, wanting to spend some time speaking with them rather than just jumping right in. But I don't understand it with a stripper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, that's probably, Heuermann probably doesn't know how to have, you know, a real interaction other than the rehearsed ones that he's had where he is charming and just, you know, so that's just my opinion.
This is, you know, makes me wonder about his relationship with his wife, who filed for divorce, by the way. That's more news.
I'm incredibly interested in to know the dynamics of the, you know.
I wonder how much they actually spoke and interacted. I mean, the house is tiny. They'd have to, unless he was gone all the time.
You know, I'm not sure, and I haven't seen too much from her. We probably aren't going to see too much about them, but I mean, I'm curious to know what her personality's like. If she's more demure and reserved, or, you know, I'm really wondering how she fit into his deviant ways.
Another thing we need to clarify while we're on the house, the soundproof room, which people keep repeating, no, not true. It wasn't. I guess you call it it was misinformation. I guess you'd call it. What happened was they were talking about the vault that he kept the guns in. Rodney Harrison, the Suffolk County Police, said, "Quote: I believe that the soundproof room and the vault, that message got misconstrued, but there is a vault. There is no soundproof room." End quote. So, you know, if it's a soundproof room, that's really compelling that he had like a torture chamber at home. But the vault with all the guns he had makes sense. He had 92 registered handguns among 279 firearms. I know people that have a lot of guns. Holy shit, though.
Yeah, that's definitely overkill
for a duck hunter.
Yeah.
Well, I think we know
it needs one shotgun.
Yeah, I think we know that it's not for duck hunting, particularly when we get to his brother, right? We'll get to his brother in a second. But yeah,
I'm curious to know if he used the guns to menace them or anything like that, and he could just pick from his assortment. I mean, because it's like Doug said. I mean, that shit is not duck hunting.
Robert Hansen comes to mind.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's a great example, Lee.
Yes. Yeah. It was, once again, it's the escorts. There's the escorts bringing them home, right? Hansen. Everyone knows about Hansen hunting them in the wild. What they don't know is that he brought them home and raped them repeatedly and tortured them first. Then he let them go in the wild. Hansen, kind of a nerdy guy as well.
Like psychological fear up to 100, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, well, maybe that is good, because then with the phone calls, right, terrorizing the families, you know, I'm going to watch your daughter rot. Maybe there's maybe this is utter malevolence, right? And okay, so then we go to the psychology of someone like this. He's into kids. He's into petite women who he strangles and beating them up, right? To me, this is a major overcompensation. This is somebody who feels really small, and then they like to become the monster. It doesn't matter that the person's small. That just makes them easier to be the monster, right? And to terrorize them, and then to terrorize the families from afar. You know, this is like an alter ego or something, or maybe that's too generous. Not an alter ego, but the true Heuermann, or, you know, who he feels good about. Not the outcast Heuermann.
Yeah. and regardless of his impression management and what he projects and all this stuff, um, he is and I've seen a lot of people say this, and it's true with serial killers like Huerman. He is a full-time serial killer. That is his full-time gig. The architecture shit is just kind of like what he does to kind of get money, and the family thing is kind of like maybe it gives him a little bit of warm and fuzzies on the inside, or whatever it is. But like he's a serial killing is his number one thing. So everything else is secondary to it. Even things he could feel that he loves is still going to be secondary.
I think it's those other things are secondary for most of them, probably.
Oh yeah, I'd agree with that. That's
those
fair.
are the things that they have to do. It's like the drudgery. That's the day to day, right? And then all looking forward to the time when they can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, like BTK. Last time I compared him to BTK, and even BTK apparently after that compared Huerman to himself too.
Mm-hmm.
But BTK, as far as and I think we can believe it, killed 10. But that wasn't all of his predation. I mean, he had all of these projects, right? These potential hits, and he'd be breaking into houses, and he was always on the prowl, but didn't actually, but only struck, as far as we know, to kill 10 victims, and not even 10 occasions, because 4 of those were in one spot, the Otero family, right?
I remember Carrie, Dennis Rader, BTK, his daughter. Carrie was telling me one time that, and I think this is in her book, that I think it was the place he was teaching her to drive or something, and it was a place where he had abducted a woman or tried to, or so it was something that had to do, and so she had no idea. She thinks she's getting a driving lesson, but he's over there, doing his BTK thing.
Ridgway was another one. Ridgway would take his wife into the woods, and they'd make love in the woods, and she was like, "Oh, he's so exciting," right? Like, It's like we're young again. It's like, no, because he's thinking about the bodies.
He's in Green River mode.
Yeah, and so they have a way of living out serial killer in their normal life too. Really, there should be a book on that. That's an interesting topic.
It seems that the overtly sexual ones are, and the very psychopathic ones are masters of integrating the compartmentalized, serial killer asshole, which one is which, and they like to kind of mix them just a little bit, and because they can't leave it alone. They can't. That's the serial killer part of them that's number one.
That's the true vital part of life, right?
Right.
Yeah, I suppose, and I hate to make this comparison, but it's like somebody who's naturally creative or artistic, right? They find ways to bring that into their life, because to live without that component of them is it's impossible, actually. Yeah. We haven't talked about Craig Huerman yet. Craig Huerman, the younger brother of Rex Huerman, who killed a police officer by accident while drunk driving, and did a little time in prison, but has lived in South Carolina for the past 20 years. Rex Huerman owns 4 plots of land in Chester, South Carolina, and his brother Craig lives there in a ramshackle home surrounded by no trespassing signs. And it's the same street where Rex purchased land. Apparently, Rex was planning to retire there. So Huerman bought a property totaling about 5 acres on Rippling Brook Drive in the Mirror Lake subdivision on July 28th, 2021 for $154,351. An older green Chevy Avalanche was impounded by the Chester County Sheriff's Department and driven out of a secluded property owned by the Huermans. So I'm not certain if that was the brother or one of his properties. As for Craig Heuerman, neighbors say we rarely see him outside. He does have a ton of dogs on the property that you can hear barking all the time, but they don't really bother us. But as far as our few interactions, they always have been pleasant. They've heard Craig yelling obscenities one evening at someone, calling her a whore. Uh-oh. I mean, it could just be a girlfriend
No,
he's angry at,
no
or
worthy
not.
choice of no worthy choice of vocabulary there.
Or not, right? Even if in that situation it's not a call girl, um, he certainly has a bad view of them, which he brings up. Okay, and they just didn't want to get involved. The neighbors, two neighbors said Craig had a rule that grass was not to be cut on Sundays. When a homeowner who lived across from him broke the rule, Craig allegedly approached him from behind and hit him over the head with a steel pole. And the neighbor who was hit said, I called the police because I was going to shoot him, but my wife talked me out of it. End quote. Neighbors also received business cards from Craig with his name, phone number, and job title, Bad Motherfucker. I kept my distance. I think he's as crazy as a bedbug, said one neighbor. One neighbor described Craig as a doomsday prepper, saying his yard is full of junk. Craig's front gate has two signs. One says keep out, no trespassing. The other says no warrant, no entry. So I don't know. I think we definitely, him and Rex have got this
Antisocial much?
But even if you took the serial killer part out, you still think these guys were volatile, right? They've got the whole we need to stock up with guns and supplies because the world's coming to an end. Well, how do they both get on that same? They've lived apart for 20 years. How are they both in that same mode? Was that the vibe in the household growing up?
So, to me, Craig seems to be way more unstable than Heuerman, as far as Heuerman can control it, and he's shown that. Craig seems to be much more of the loose cannon of the two. And then going back to Heuerman's killing a police captain during a drunk driving incident, drunk and coked up, according to an article.
Craig Heuerman,
Craig Heuerman. Wondering about substance abuse in Rex's life as well, how he uses substances, like if it's an issue, if it just adds more and more things to speculate about, honestly.
Well, they've talked about Rex Heuerman having problems with drinking, and there was a classmate. Oh, sorry, I don't know if it was a classmate. It was a neighbor, classmate, or something that said, "Oh, if that's him, I knew him growing up, and he was a druggie." As someone pointed out, that druggie means different things to different people. It could mean like he smoked a joint in high school, and that's to me a druggie. But there does seem to be the substance abuse issue with them. There's potentially, I gotta watch what I say here. There's definitely a sex work issue with Rex, and then we hear language about sex workers from Craig, using it as an insult.
Let's just go with the obvious: derogatory towards women in general. And I mean, you can build from that to further into demeaning sex workers for Rex or stuff, but that seems to be a common thing between both of them with language like that, and Rex's behavior. That can't be overlooked,
And the survivalist thing,
very weird,
being ready. Yeah. So if they both have so many of those things, you think that would have started before they parted ways, and it came from whatever petri dish they grew in. So
when did they part? When did they part ways?
Well, Craig has been living in South Carolina for 20 years now. To be fair, they could talk on the phone. We know Rex goes up there, but if one of them was just pretending to be that way because he thought the other wanted him to be that way, I don't think it would be so pronounced when they were separate. I think they're both truly into that stuff.
I don't know. Knowing that Craig, because I didn't know a lot about Craig, but knowing that he's a survivalist, I wouldn't be surprised if the number count of firearms is like a competition between the two of them, and I wouldn't be surprised if Craig has a similar amount of firearms.
Yeah,
What else do you need 300 firearms for?
I don't know.
So unless it's some kind of collection, but I wouldn't be surprised. And the other thing with the firearms, just quickly, is I don't think they discovered the firearms. They knew they were there, which is why he was arrested in Manhattan. You don't want to blockade a guy in his house with 300 firearms.
Good point, Doug. Excellent point.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that was his whole thing. Oh, if they ever do get me for this, they won't take me alive, right?
Yeah,
because I am also Rex Heuermann, also bad motherfucker, and I've got all this in there. And then they're like, okay, but you for 92 of them, you needed a permit, which you registered, and so now we're not gonna take you in your home. Yeah.
So something that stands out to me about Craig is there seems to be a lot of bravado and intimidation, and I'm curious to know. I mean, I'm sure it's there with Rex too, but I wonder. Well, I'm not sure it's there, but I'd imagine.
Yes. From what I've read, yes.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering, Craig's seems to come out in less than social ways, but not torturing sex workers. So I'm curious to know Rex is if he has similar behaviors and what makes him behave like that,
Yeah, I would say it probably something about how they were raised together.
Yeah.
I mean, we have some details about their father and mother, but not really about the culture in the house. Mm-hmm. His father was military, if I recall correctly. He was a tradesman of some kind. Is he a carpenter? Can't remember. If anyone knows that, please throw it up in the comments. Just look that up for us for a second. I can't remember what their father did for a living. He was some kind of tradesman. So I mean, the idea that it develops separately, it's too coincidental. Maybe these are two guys that are just bragging, going over the phone to each other, like, "Oh, it's all coming down, man. I've got this many guns, so I'm doing it out here too." And so maybe it can be maintained at a long distance.
Maybe,
but it's weird because it's more what you find in mass murderers.
Yeah, definitely. Or you're apocalyptic Waco type, the end of the world type.
And they bought those properties together, correct? So
yeah, I bet you they were hooking up for like, let's get ready scenario. We'll get all of our properties together or something like that and build like a compound or a series of fortifications. You can see that conversation going, right? And I'm going here reluctantly, okay, because I want to first say there's absolutely no charges or evidence that Craig Heuermann has done anything to hurt women at all, right? So, but in discussing that, I am reminded of Lake Inning, right? Survivalists who built this bunker and were also sexual sadists,
right? Well, it also makes you wonder how Craig and Rex's relationship is. Who's more dominant, or are they? What's going on there? What's that relationship like? Is it something that there's potential for Craig to Rex to maybe influence Craig and nurture this idea of, hey, we've got all these guns, we're out here in the middle of nowhere, let's torture someone. I don't know.
Maybe he was planning to introduce that later, right? It was a grooming process. That's why I said, be very careful of what we. I'm not saying that that's Craig Heuermann at all, but it did occur to me with that because I was thinking, well, who else did that survivalist thing and was a serial killer? One of the answers is Lake and Ing, who were sexual sadists.
Right, fortified bunker and torture bunker and all that. And what's the purpose of that? Was Heuermann, was he interested in documenting these torture or whatever he was doing? I can't say torture, but I can't imagine he wasn't physically torturing them. I mean,
based on his porn searches, I would say that put money on that he was physically torturing them, and I'd also put more money on the fact that he documented it with photographs and maybe even video, because why wouldn't he? Like, if he gets caught for killing them, right, he's already caught. So then they find that stuff later. What does he care?
Right.
We don't know the contents of that house yet. This is a guy that used electronics in his crimes a lot. He was a smart guy. He had a lot of money, and he was a sexual sadist, according to what we've seen in his porn searches. So why wouldn't he document these things? And I think it's just a matter of time. Like that's coming. That would probably be in the vault. Let's be realistic.
Yeah,
He's probably putting it in the vault with the guns.
If it was to be somewhere, it would definitely be somewhere. Because people aren't going to go fuck with his guns, and he's not going to let people go fuck with his guns. So why not put it in there?
Okay, so now is a good time to bring this piece up here. Interior designer Catherine Shepard recalled how she so she'd worked with Huerman for 5 years. She had spent 3 hours assessing his home for a renovation project. And in the basement, there was this one room, this is her own words, that was locked. And he said I couldn't go in that room. I was like, what the hell? That's weird. And he was kind of joking, like, oh, you can't go in there because there's things in there. And then eventually, I've got a bunch of guns, right? Now, it could be, don't go in there because I've got a bunch of guns, right? That's just responsible firearms ownership. But having a bunch of guns is a good cover for, you can't go in here because I'm being responsible, right? I can't let people around my guns. Oh, okay. It's a bit like Russell Williams, the Canadian serial killer. He's a serial killer to me. Only 2 known victims that we know. But Russell Williams is like, well, I'm in the Air Force. This is classified, honey. Can't go in my classified things. And the classified things are full of photographs of him wearing like little kids' underwear of the houses that he broke into and such, right? So it's a good cover.
And everything's a potential cover. We're talking, this fucker doesn't give a fuck. Anything. And I'm curious to know what they found in the storage unit.
Where was the storage unit?
I'm not sure. I want to say in Long Island as well, but I couldn't tell you where.
Yeah, it was Long Island somewhere.
Well, look, he's keeping all of his goodies somewhere.
Right? Oh, for sure. For sure.
I think that's just a matter of time. More victims, maybe we won't. I think we're going to get charges for Brainerd Barnes. But beyond the 4, maybe not. I think there is more. Whether we actually get to them, I don't know. But as for are they going to start breaking out some freaky stuff he had, I would be absolutely shocked if they didn't. This is an interesting comment here that relates to it, actually. It was from Kim Caltagirone. At the press conference yesterday, a reporter asked the DA about 10 different ways if they found a mattress in the vault. He would not give her a direct answer. He just kept saying they found many things in the house that have to be processed. You'd think if they didn't find a mattress, he'd just be like, no.
Or would the mattress be for him? Because I can't see him giving a victim a mattress. I'm sorry.
For sexually assaulting the victim on, perhaps?
Yeah.
But then his wife's not home anyways, so why not just use the bed? Unless we're talking about cases.
But then it gets weird,
cases, right?
Yeah. If people are seeing a mattress and by some chance, and people are like, "Why the fuck do you have a mattress?" It's just. I think he was a little too. He got away with this for a long time. Rex Huerman is an adept serial killer.
Yes. His downfall was those phones.
Yeah.
And but in the age of DNA, to get away with it for that long, it's okay.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy. Okay. Let's learn a little bit more about Rex. Accused serial killer Rex Huerman was bizarrely close to his controlling mother while he was an adolescent. He would tell friends, quote, things like, I have to get home to my mother. I always, end quote. I always got the impression he was close to his mother. His mother seemed to be his all, said a classmate. I don't know. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Like, his mother was widowed, right? And so there's just a part of me thinking that doesn't seem like great evidence that he was way too close to his mother yet. And with Gary Ridgway, we have the whole, like, she cleaned my penis after I wet the bed. And that's too close to your mother.
Right.
But like what his mother was widowed and he was close to her. If that's it, I have to get home to my mother. I think it's almost becoming like a cheap excuse. Like, oh, he was too close to his mother. But then if he wasn't too close to his mother, oh, his mother abandoned him or was emotionally negligent, right? I think that it's just a standard thing that we look for in serial killers. Unless more info comes out about that. This is a fun one. 1980, Berner High School in Massapequa put on a production of Arsenic and Old Lace. Huerman worked behind the scenes as a stage tech. During one rehearsal, Huerman, without telling anyone, added extra weight to the bottom of the pulley system that raised and lowered the stage curtains. When she pulled on a lever to drop the when a student pulled on a lever to drop the curtains while holding onto a rope connected to the system, her 95-pound body suddenly went soaring toward the auditorium ceiling. Huerman quickly helped her down and apologized. She said, quote, "He had reweighted all of them so that only he could do it or somebody strong could do it. It created a dangerous situation," end quote. And so I think it was Scott Bond came in and was like, this shows his early sadism or something like that. It's like, does it?
Or control.
Or insecurity. Making it so that he's the only guy that can operate the curtains.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a sense of we want to put a portrait together here of this person that is serial killery, because that's what we're used to when the case is that big. But I don't know. We've all fucked up in some way a bit like that, right?
And it's that portrait that with cases like this that I kind of, a lot of times I just sit back and wait because, take for example, the soundproof room, the vault, just going back quickly, as soon as I heard that, I said, well, to myself, you have 300 guns. You obviously need a vault to secure them. Mm-hmm. Soundproof room, I've worked a lot of construction and there's soundproof rooms for any number of reasons.
I have a soundproof room.
The sound of a theater, for a podcast. Most adults when they build houses now, they make their bedroom soundproof so the kids can't hear them. Like, just the floor for the furnace. There's any number of reasons you could soundproof anything. So there was that. And the other thing I thought is, if there's actually a torture room there, you're either indirectly implicating the wife, or you're kind of showing that there's this greater element of control that's what's been made public, where she's not allowed in parts of her own house. So I don't know. It's just rather than jumping all over these news headlines, I kind of like to, sit back and wait. And because you're right, anything that comes out, you can direct it towards that, what a serial killer is.
I think when this first broke, we had like some just good quality necessary news. And then they took note, oh my God, look at how many clicks this is getting. And so now we're onto like the dregs of the news, where it's like, we need more Huerman, right? Fine, this person said something happened, let's go talk to her. Someone said that he did something weird once, right? Go talk to him. And so it's just, it may or may not be relevant. Mm-hmm. At this point, it's really more about the media than understanding a serial killer. Quite now.
I think the want for information is just insatiable right now too. So the media is just whatever they can get, throw at the public. The public's going to gobble it up, and that's just where we're at with it right now. So it's super. This case is crazy sensationalized. Info's touch and go. Just 2 days ago, we had a torture chamber. I like what Doug says. Logical move is to wait and look at things orderly. But fuck, man, everyone's like running to the seam of their pants with info.
Yeah.
Well, you sometimes look. You just have a financial interest. It's just the fact, right? When Rex Huerman case came out, I was like, oh, good. Something I can talk about on Murder Was the Case. Like, and I'm actually excited about it. I'm not going through okay, now what am I going to talk about, right? Okay, we didn't talk about We didn't talk about Neil Falls yet. Maybe I can find a way to shoehorn that into the show. Right?
I'd love to talk about Neil Falls if you ever want to. I'm just putting that out there. So
Okay. Well, the night is young. Yeah, but I don't know. It's not necessarily sinister. I think maybe being reckless with it is a bad thing. Try not to be reckless with it, but it is exciting in the way. It's like, well, what are we going to learn? I mean, all the murders have happened already. There's no undoing those. So are we looking at some sort of great white shark predator? That's what it seemed like. But now they've done searching the house. We haven't heard news of them finding any bodies, but they will have found something of interest.
Just to quickly comment on a couple of the comments there, because I'm just watching the chat. Wouldn't most vaults automatically be soundproof? Yes. I mean, concrete has an element of sound.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And another Facebook user, soundproof room in a dilapidated old house. People renovate their houses all the time and include elements of soundproofing, whether it's concrete or whether it's just rock solid insulation. There's people do things all the time. So you just kind of got to be sure of what you're looking at before.
My house is from the 19th century, so it's very old. But because I do the show and a lot of recordings, I'm working on getting a room soundproof downstairs, and the windows blocked up too because I want to be able to control the light in there, right? So if I was accused of a crime, you might say, "Look, see what kind of person he was," but really it's just a function of my occupation.
Yeah, it's people. People are playing fast and loose with the applications of information, and it'll shake itself out in due time, and we'll learn what's meat and what's fat,
Well, here's an interesting allegation. Allegedly, Rex told an ex-sex worker that his favorite serial killers were the Hillside Stranglers.
Interesting.
Yeah. Interesting that there's two as well. What do you think? What do you make of this idea that there might be two of them, Chris? I thought that given the way that the bodies were left, it seemed like a one-person job. I can't remember two people leaving bodies quite like that.
For which case?
For LISK, the cases that the murders Huerman has been charged with.
Right. So there's been some talk, and I'm sure we'll touch on this, of a female being involved in certain regards and stuff, and I'm sure the rumors are out there that there's other people involved, but Rex Huerman was a big fucking dude who could, he could say, "Oh, I'm out for a drive. I live across the bay." He's not going to pull a fucking Joel Rifkin flip out and like hit the gas because he's got a body in the back. Rex Huerman will play it cool. I'm sure he had everything in order. He goes out to that area, stops. He's big enough. I think Josh Seaman said that the bodies were dumped like right off the road, tosses them and has an idea where they are, and generally, if not exactly.
I get the impression that they weren't like flung out the car. They were definitely taken out and placed with some care, but it wasn't far from the road. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's not a two-man job that Rex Huerman needed someone else to, because, there's cases where, I need you to come help me get rid of this body. I can't move this body, That's not the case here.
If it's two people, I think the chances that it would have gone this long without being solved in this day and age is unlikely too, because the more people you involved, it's actually more likely that somebody's going to spill the beans. And so, yeah, my thought is probably less likely than more likely. You're talking about the idea of the female involvement, Chris. So, yeah, lawyer John Ray. So I believe that's the lawyer of Shannon Gilbert.
Yeah.
Who has Huerman has not been charged with her death yet. In fact, we don't even know that it was a murder. That one's still very much up in the air. It was probably the LISK associated death which received the most press coverage. That's where she ran screaming through the swamp area, if I recall correctly, right? She was an escort, and she'd gone to someone's house, and he called the police and was like, "She's flipping out. I don't know what's up." And they found her, and some reports have said that her neck was broken. But anyways, so her lawyer, John Ray, was tipped off ahead of time that Huerman was going to be arrested. The same source that told him also named a second suspect, but Ray would not release the name, but said, quote, "We also believe some of the victims could have been lured by a woman," end quote. This belief is based in part on info that the body of a toddler was found wrapped in blankets in April 2011. Quote, "It's the kind of thing that if you're a depraved murderer, you don't take the time to do. That to me seems like the act of a mother," end quote. Well, before I go on with that, every time a body's wrapped in blankets, it doesn't show female nurturing care. That's a mistake people make with JonBenet Ramsey, right? Oh, there's like a bit of a blanket around her, so it must have been Patsy. It's like there's other reasons to put someone in a blanket. It obfuscates them. If you're carrying them to the crime scene, it can make them easier to carry. It can be for you don't want to look at it, but it doesn't necessarily indicate a female. And Huerman hasn't even been linked to that yet.
Right.
So, Ray also said a woman was involved in threatening calls that were made to his home and office since January, directly referencing his work representing the families of Jessica Taylor and Shannon Gilbert. So, it's Shannon Gilbert's family and Jessica Taylor's family. Quote, "The same language is used, the same tape recordings are used, it's the same eerie voices and crazy sounds used in every one of them. They play news reports from the Shannon Gilbert case from around 2011, 2012, and make noises in the background at the same time. Then they say some nasty or weird things to let us know that whoever it was, they wanted to make sure we connected the call to the Gilgo situation," end quote. Some have suggested that Ray was being watched, including some of the calls suggested that Ray was being watched, including one asking if he was enjoying dinner on a night he was eating later than usual. Then this person a few seconds later said, "I hope you enjoy your pizza." Within seconds, our doorbell rang and there was a guy delivering 3 pizzas and they didn't order. We called the police and the pizza person who took the order said it was a woman with a man in the background pretending to choose toppings that made the call. Ray said the calls had stopped with Rex Huerman's arrest. I think it's someone playing a terrible joke.
I think so as well.
People do that, unfortunately, right? It was in the Yorkshire Ripper case. You had a guy pretending to be Peter Sutcliffe. It's been public that phone calls have been made to the victims in this case. And so you've got a city with as many people as New York. There's going to be some sick people in there that want to take the opportunity to make a joke out of it.
Yeah, I can't. John Ray, is that his name?
Yeah.
He sounds like he's pretty confident, but I mean, I really don't agree with a whole lot of what he says and stuff. And yeah, I lean towards what you said, Lee, in that these are just some fucking idiots or fucked up people, whatever. I don't think it's Rex Huerman. That sounds.
And why do they stop when Huerman's arrested? Because they go, "Oh shit, the police are tracing the phone calls."
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not going to be fun anymore once you realize, man, every time we're doing this, we're risking, at the very least, being outed to the media as the people that are doing this.
Yeah. And not to mention, oh shit, I forgot what I was going to say. I don't know. I forgot what I was going to say. Doug disappeared and it distracted me.
That's okay. Facebook user, I submit I would not spend money on a soundproof room in my basement before cleaning it up. Did we mention cleaning it?
Was it clean?
Yeah, apparently his house is pretty messy. It's about priorities. You all are dismissing the room as if it's nothing. I disagree. And I'm not dismissing the room as if it's nothing. I'm just saying that it's not necessarily something. To say that something isn't necessarily something isn't dismissing it as nothing. There's an in-between space there.
And I mean, we're not talking about building an acoustic recording studio or something, we're talking about
What's a gun vault?
Yeah, it's.
Yeah. Because yeah, I don't know, man. That's not really fair because we were talking before about how it's a great cover to have a gun vault. So how are we dismissing the room as if it's nothing if that's the case? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't want to make it sound like I'm dismissing a soundproof room or vault. It's just I just don't. There's not enough for me. There's not enough information out about it yet. That's all.
It's like
it could very well be something critical.
Well, it's
and
like
the police seemed very confident and very distinct in making sure that it was a vault and not a soundproof room. You know. So I don't know. I don't. They're not going to do that if there's a possibility. It's just it's kind of, you know, past that. I think maybe not to dismiss the room. It's just that I think that's.
I'm not dismissing it. I think it very well could be used for something, but it's just to say it doesn't necessarily mean that. And some people are going, well, it must mean this, and it's like, no, you can have a soundproof room in your house for other reasons. It's like if you have I have nunchucks in my house, right? If I'm in a crime, like you could say, look, he's got nunchucks. That's, you know, they must have been used in the crime, but or I just want nunchucks, right?
I get that it's not common, and you know, when you're a suspected serial killer, and you know, we get it, but
for sure.
But you still have to look at it in the sense that it's still a normal thing that people, you know, they get. Yeah.
So Facebook user, we clarified that earlier. So no worries that you misunderstood. It was misinfo that went around. Facebook user says, I understood there was a soundproof room in the house, separate from the storage area under the house. I could be wrong, but it was sure they were different spaces. What it was a vault for his guns, which, as Doug said, is going to be soundproof because it's a vault. And that information got misconstrued, and everyone's been talking about there being a soundproof room as if it was a as if it was a room just designed to be soundproof, but not the case. Yeah, no problem. Glad we could clear that up. Yeah, it's amazing how what's that phrase? A lie gets around the world before the truth even has time to put its pants on. And this isn't even a lie, right? This is misinformation. It's a misunderstanding, right? Not everything is malevolent either.
No, it's honestly just a feeding frenzy right now of give and take information, and you know, not everything is going to come out roses on that. Some people are going to get shit wrong, or you know, it's going to happen. But that's the thing is that I love it because I'm taking all of it in and I'm getting to gather it and have a look at it, and then later on we're going to find out what's relevant and what's not, you know. So we can always, you know, build a nice reference and what have you right now.
It's amazing what gets overlooked too. Like sometimes there are things. So the Bruce MacArthur case in Toronto was the case that occurred after like a couple months after I'd started this podcast, and so it was like the case that kind of got this podcast going. And there was things in that case which to me it was like, oh wow, that's interesting. Like that he had collected their hair in baggies, and he had pictures of them in different stages of shaving, and then like no one ever mentioned it. It was just not a big deal to anyone at all. And I'm going, that's probably the most interesting part of the case. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see which little details come out about this. Kim Calderon said they didn't call a medical examiner to one of the storage sites last week, ? So
I think there might have been one present at the Amityville storage unit. But I don't think that anything came of it, or there were any remains found or anything like that. Just I think it was maybe just precautionary, possibly, because you know, who the fuck knows what you're gonna find there? Come on.
Right. She says, if true, wouldn't an Emmy only be called out for a body? That's a good point.
Maybe.
But you're thinking as a precaution.
Yeah, precaution, or maybe they might have found something that they might have suspected to be human bones, or who knows?
Right.
We don't know. So.
Right. They were looking, there was an overhead shot of the dig in Huerman's backyard, and there were things that they said they looked like bones, and then I think it was some sort of scientific anatomy expert, like a pathologist or anthropologist, looked at it and said, no, I don't think so, because they're too rectangular. Yes. So it's possible that, even though you're right though, Chris, even in that situation, they might have said, well, we think we've got some bones, and it turns out to be like a dog bones or something, right? A lot of people have animals buried in their yard, or, I mean, he's a weird guy too. Like, it could be that it's not a body. It could be what we were just talking about with MacArthur, that he's got locks of hair in a bag or something. So it's not that it's not at all related to murders, but it could be from the same victims, and not necessarily an amputated body part, but something more extraneous, like hair or nails or something like that. Or
who knows what the fuck they're finding out? Teeth? Who knows? We don't know if he beat them. I mean, it's very, very possible. You know, who the fuck knows what they're gonna find, or what they have found, or.
Well, looking at his porn searches, I'd say like pretty certain that he did hit them in some way.
I would imagine he roughed them up. You know, he seemed to have a thing for you know, some blunt force trauma, and who knows? Maybe I wouldn't think he beat him to death. I think there would probably be
more. No, we'd see that on the bones.
Yeah. But yeah, I can definitely see him, you know, roughing them up and you know, hitting them and physically striking them, things like that.
That feeling of power, right? That we talked about. I'm big, you're small, I'm in control. Yeah.
And he's not trying to. It's not a control thing in the sense of I'm gonna smack her around and she's gonna be compliant. You know, it's I'm gonna smack her around and she's gonna scream more.
She will weep and beg and ask me to stop, and that will just make my dick harder.
Yep.
That's sexual sadism.
Yep, that is 100%. And Huerman is the sexual you know, like like you said earlier, Lee, we haven't seen somebody like this since D'Angelo, and we know how fucking gnarly D'Angelo is, you know.
He's worse. Like his porn searches and stuff showed to me he's a lot more farther down the abyss than D'Angelo is. You know, this guy is it's like I don't know. Yeah, he's like a great white shark sexual sadist type. Like not quite a David Parker Ray, but like a step down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a Bernardo, maybe. Paul Bernardo, something like that.
Yeah.
This was interesting. It's a little bit lighter, but the Massapequa Park Village Mayor Daniel Pearl and Nassau County Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder we're talking about how people are coming down and it's starting to become a murder tourism site. Pearl said Massapequa Park was laying the groundwork to potentially buy the First Avenue property, so Huerman's house. Quote, legally, we're getting everything lined up so the village is prepared to move forward when the time comes, end quote. Huerman bought it for $170K in 1994 and estimated it at $635K on Zillow now. So it's like 5 times what he paid for it, or just slightly under, there to sell it. So, I mean, the question is, what if his wife, I'm guessing it goes to his wife. What if she doesn't want to sell it?
God damn it. I can't imagine she wouldn't, but hypothetically,
and then are you buying it for $635K?
Yeah.
Knock it down?
That's what I'd imagine is going to happen with it. I think someone's going to tear it down.
That's strange, though, isn't it? That in some serial murders or famous murders, the house is torn down like it is this shunned place that has to be wiped from the face of the earth, and other times they just leave it. Like the Amityville house is still there.
It is. There's a lot of interest. The Dean Coral house is still there, where he tortured was it 27 boys? I mean, that's still there in Houston or the Houston suburbs.
That's horrific place.
Absolutely. You know, so but I mean, you got to think Huerman's house kind of looks like a dump too. Like, who the fuck?
Right. We've been looking for an excuse to knock down that shit pile.
Who's gonna jump on a fucking serial killer's house that's like all dilapidated? I mean, like,
Yeah,
what kind of fucking investment is that? Like, it's hard to see anything happening than, you know, this getting knocked down or remodeled or something. But you know, like Coral's house was there. Gary Heidnick's house was left abandoned there in Philadelphia for a very long time. You know, it really depends on the community and who's around there. You know, if they don't want that stigma and they don't want people taking those morbid tours, because it's never going to stop now, you know, as long as that house is there. So, I mean, it depends to see how the community, when Dahmer, I've read before that Dahmer, after all of his shit, there was a developer or something. I can't remember what he did off the top of my head, but apparently he bought all the shit from Dahmer's apartment and destroyed it, and then, you know, the building got knocked down and stuff. So I think communities act or react to these things differently, and we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's a media issue too, right? Like, it's bizarre to me that there's a place like Dean Coral's where boys could be raped, tortured for days, and killed, and no one thinks to knock it down, or just doesn't seem to. And some places go down almost immediately.
Yeah.
What does that say about the way that the crime is digested by the greater society?
So I remember when there's, in the next county over from me is Volusia County, and when I was 19, I saw in the news that they found 6 people in a house dead over there. So I zoomed over there, and this was the biggest mass murder in the history of the county. What had happened was 3 people. This is called, if anybody wants to look up this case, it's called the Xbox, or the Xbox murders, or the Delta.
Troy.
Troy Victorino.
Troy.
So,
the stomp on the dog. That's the sick. That's the part I remember. But stomped on a little dog and killed the people over. They were like, "Why did you do that?" While she wouldn't let me have my Xbox.
Yeah, brutal fucking case. I was out there the day they found the bodies. Yeah. And they had it all taped off and everything. The house is still there, you couldn't even get close to it the night of and all that. And I'd imagine people, you know, still go to see it. I know Victorino's and one of his co-defendants, who were 2 of the 4 sentenced to death. They are in Volusia for resentencing right now. So, you know, the case is back in the news and stuff, and I don't know, man. It's communities handle it differently, and I don't know. If I lived in that neighborhood, I'd probably want that fucker to be torn down.
Facebook user asked, "Are all of ex-Colonel Russell Williams, who I mentioned before, how is his standing? Hopefully LISK's wife can sell at least the property for her and their kids." Yeah, that's like, I'm hoping. I don't think there is a way they could force her to sell it for less. I don't think that would be right. So hopefully nothing like that happens. But I don't know, Doug, you're in Ottawa area. Did they, that Orleans house, I guess no crimes happened, like no murders happened there. That's probably still there, right?
His crimes there were, he was sneaking into teenage girls' houses and stealing their underwear.
Yeah. But there's the one in Tweed where he killed Jessica Lloyd in the house.
Exactly. I'm just talking about the one in Orleans, and they haven't, to my knowledge, they never tore that down. I mean, it's in a subdivision that, they wouldn't have torn that down. But
Marie France Como was killed in her house in Brighton. I didn't hear that they tore that down, and that's what I'm saying.
What are they going to do? Are they going to keep someone on patrol? I'm sorry, Lee, to interrupt you, but Are they going to keep someone on patrol there for till the end of time, giving out $150 citations? Like, what the fuck is going to? Either they got to move the fuck on or tear it down, or something. I mean, a decision's got to get made. You know.
Okay, well, as you brought that up, Nassau County Police Chief Patrick Ryder said the county executive has made it very clear that we are protecting the neighborhood and we are not allowing this to turn into a sideshow. If you don't live on that street or visiting someone on that street and are there to stop and take pictures and break the law, you will be issued a summons. I'm going to trust my professional police officers to make, basically, paraphrasing, with the right decision. This is a community where there are lots of kids playing. So, yeah, I mean, I get it. Yeah, it would ruin the neighborhood. It already has ruined the neighborhood, but it's going to continually ruin the neighborhood and not allow people to move past it.
In a case where it's so heavily geographically affiliated, the Gilgo 4, the Long Island serial killer, you know, like it's very, very focused on places.
Yeah. There's just so many crimes, though, where those places are still intact and almost like resurrected. Like I've been on the Jack the Ripper tour in Whitechapel and Spitalfields. You know, it's almost like they're trying to make it there because so much of it has changed. You know, it's like going through Bangladeshi neighborhoods mainly now. But they're like, these are the walks, or this would have been here, or in your neck of the woods, Chris, the bar that Eileen Wuornos was arrested at. Really, you'd think that that's of no particular interest, like no crimes happen there. They have a shrine time. That might be a little bit much. They have shrine-like things to Eileen Wuornos there, and you can buy T-shirts and everything. So it's like in some I guess what is that because it's not near any houses? Perhaps.
I think it's just the environment. It's a seedy biker bar, you know.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get a lot of pushback on that there.
Well, maybe that's okay. That's okay. Perhaps the most obvious thing then. Like, why do they knock down the Bernardo house? The Bernardo house was knocked down because terrible things happened there, but it's in a residential neighborhood that no one would go to for any other reason. Massapequa Park is the same. Fred and Rose West, they knocked their house down. What other? Did they knock down the Gacy house?
I think so. Yeah. I'm pretty sure they did. Like they put something different on the lot.
You know, I don't mind if they knock the house down if it's like Bernardo and Homolka, just the couple, the killer or the killers living there. But you know, like when they have family that also live there and that were not, you know, involved in the crimes, I don't know. I'm kind of neutral there, just because I mean they still need a place to live. It's still their home. They didn't do anything wrong, so I get both sides of it, but
it'd be hard to imagine that she would still live there, but you never know.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not always financially feasible just to get up and move, especially in Long Island, New York.
Well, how much is this going to cost her too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Rex Heuermann has a lot of money, but that's going to disappear pretty quickly. There could be
He
civil
divorced
suits.
him, yeah.
Right. And you know, who knows their income situation, you know?
Heuermann was making good coin, but he also had like major debts.
Well, he ain't been doing fuck all now. So if he was the provider, that, you know, that's, I don't know. I cannot imagine they were going to stay in that house.
No. Facebook user said they had gutted Gacy's house so that there was not much to knock down. 10,050 Cielo Drive, where the Manson murders took place, stood for a long time before they tore it down. That was a shrine of anything, which is strange too, because that's in an affluent neighborhood.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Is there doesn't seem to be a rule here. It's like
I think it's the lore of it.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm fine with them knocking it down as long as the family doesn't want to stay there. Yeah, flatten it. Yeah, and in a neighborhood like that, you can't turn. I understand completely. You don't want to turn that into a tourist attraction. That's you know, it's sick. It doesn't have any historical value. Like, you know, Jack the Ripper is almost like a riff in some ways to talk about, you know, Dickens in London, right? How do you do that with the Rex Heuermann crimes? there's no mystery to it, right? It doesn't linger unsolved in any way. It's just, yeah.
It's just dark tourism.
Right.
Yeah.
Or whatever you want to call it, true crime tourism or whatever.
Which I'm guilty of.
Yeah.
Me too. I love doing that shit. But you know what? If somebody's like, yo, what are you doing? I got to live here. That's fucking annoying. Get lost. I'd be like, hey, yeah, okay, you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry. You know?
We were filming a TV news spot on murders in Washington State, and Cloyd and I went to outside of Anne Marie Burr's house.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady wasn't happy. Like, oh, don't film here. And it's like, well, we're all here with the news. You know, I understand, but at the same time, it happened in 1961. And do you know what I mean?
I actually...
Were you surprised? Well, you bought this, and I think she was. Not that we were there, but I don't think that they told her when she bought it about how maybe that this crime was linked to Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
So it's a shame in that way.
I don't know. Around here in Orlando, the Casey Anthony case, little tiny case. If nobody's ever heard of it, you should probably look it up.
Right.
I was checking out the area where they found her body, and right down the street is the house. When I was going by the house, George Anthony was in the garage, and I went and talked to him, and they're still living in there. That was the house that, they lived in, and they still have Kaylee's room the same for the most part. I mean, it's, so that Huerman's family could stay there. I mean, it really it depends on the people. It depends on the community. It's interesting to see what they're going to do with it. I can't imagine anyone wants to live in there, but I'm sure some weirdo does.
Yeah, I guess really this all just arose from the question of, well, what if she doesn't want to sell it? Because they seem like certain that it's going either way. I was just doing that, but with, like, for instance, going to the Burr house, we didn't go there to like roll on the grass and go, "Ooh, this is where a girl was abducted." Right? We went there because we were actually measuring the distance from Ted Bundy's house and using a drone to show people the close proximity of it. So people aren't always going there for bad reasons. I had this debate with a professor one time at a conference. She was saying like the Jack the Ripper tour should be banned. And I said, okay, well, what about like, Holocaust sites? And she's like, no, they're okay. I'm like, well, they're both sites of terrible homicides, right? What's the difference? They both have something you can learn historically. I guess what I'm saying is you don't know what a given individual is taken from it. And she made the assumption that if you're going on a Holocaust tour, that you're going with noble intentions. And I don't think that's true at all. I think there's plenty of people that just rock up and are really disrespectful at some of those Holocaust places. Like here I am at the, Treblinka or whatever, doing a little, smiling or whatever. And I think there's like when I went on the Jack the Ripper tour, I was going there for a criminological inquiry. I wanted to walk it after reading so much about it. So I just don't think it's obvious. And I don't think you can go, well, it's clearly when it's about this only, it has to be preserved for noble reasons. But when it's about this, it's only for sickos.
Something Kim says in the chat, I'd be really ticked if somebody sold me a house and didn't tell me it had been a serial killer's house or somebody had been murdered there. So that's happened before. There's a serial killer named Maury Travis. He killed, tortured and killed women, sex workers, I believe, in his basement. Later on, a woman was renting the house, I believe, from Maury Travis's mother, and still had furniture that she was watching an episode of Cold Case Files on Maury Travis and sees the room she's sitting in and the dining room table. And she was like, oh my fucking God. They didn't tell her that that was Maury Travis's house where he killed, who knows how many women.
Well, that's interesting in itself, Chris, because everyone knows about Rex Heuermann, Maury Travis killed like 17 people, 17 sex workers, and tortured them in his basement and filmed it. Nobody knows who Maury Travis is.
Exactly.
Well, what's that about?
Couldn't tell you. I mean, he's not an architect, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He's not an architect. He doesn't have a wife and kids, and
he's black, and the victims are black. There's that too.
Yeah, and you know, you got a black guy mingling with sex workers and people. Just you know, it doesn't have that sensationalism, you know. And that's the thing is like, there's so many fucking serial killers who are just like rolling through shitty areas, killing Terry Blair, people like that.
Right, yeah.
You know, and that's the thing is they don't get traction, and they're super interesting, and they don't get the traction, and that's why, because they don't have the mine hunter package, the serial killer package, you know.
The Travis case was fascinating though, because he got caught because he used, was it Expedia or something like that? He used one of those mappings. So he sent a cop or a journalist. He sent him a digital map like, here's this victim. So then they just called MapQuest or whatever the hell it was and said, hey, some guy claiming to be a killer used your site and looked for this on this day. Can you give us the IP address? Oh yeah, here you go. And so then they walk in there and they say to Maury Travis, they bring it up, and his reaction was, damn internet, damn computers.
I mean, he wasn't the smartest guy. That's another strike against him, you know. It's like he doesn't have, that's a, people want to see the Rex Heuermann. They want to see the BTK, you know. They don't want to see Maury Travis and Terry Blair and Lorenzo Gilliard and all that, you know. And
so is it a race thing then? Because that's the theme that we're getting on here.
I don't think it's a race thing particularly. I think because look at Sam Little. Sam Little got significant press coverage.
Robert Yates really didn't get that much press coverage on a national level. He killed like 18 people. He was white. The victims were mainly white. Yeah, sex workers. So there's something else. It's like the house thing. What is it? It's hard to put your finger on what it is.
It really is. It's really it's an interesting sociological question. I think it's the best way to attack it.
What if? Sorry, go ahead, Doug. No.
I was just going to say, I think the interest from the public and the coverage is equal across the board until they're caught and the backstory comes out. Mm-hmm. You know, like for example, the Stockton serial killer that was in the last couple of years there. Everybody was into the Stockton serial killer. Who is this person going around killing people in Stockton, California? And then the person was caught and just faded away.
Yeah, a little scrub ass kid with a knife and some mental problems, most likely, and
which was obvious, shooting people, by the way. Yeah.
So
yeah, I think too, though, maybe comes down to like a television series, right? LISK had movies made about it. It had podcasts, so it had all of this media bringing attention to this unknown case. It's like if Zodiac got caught now, it would be massive because Zodiac has had all of that going for it. But some of these other cases don't have that.
But it's not necessarily a race thing.
No, you're right. Yeah.
Tommy Lynn Sells. Look at Tommy Lynn Sells and Cora Watts, a black man and a white man. Potentially huge body count that I think that they are legit for. Pushing up on 100, both of them, and they never got any of this, half the press coverage that Heuermann's gotten in a couple weeks,
Right.
And a lot of this just goes back to geography, because some of the serial killers that you guys have mentioned, I have no idea who they are. And if you go back before, let's say 1980, everybody knows who the big serial killers are from the big cities with the big media, the big press coverage. But all the smaller towns, the smaller cities, they don't know who they are. They've never heard of them. And it's no different today. Long Island, New York City, there's more press coverage, more media, more powerful media than some small town in I don't know, Ohio. I don't know. You know what I mean? So it
Yeah,
just
that's a
goes
good
back to
observation.
geography and press coverage. And
Well, we only heard about the eastbound stranglings because when LISK came to prominence, people said, well, could there be more? And then they said, oh, but that's like almost identical as far as victim demographics and types. And it's not like Atlantic City is the backwater, right? Atlantic City is a major tourism center.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I still think there's something we can't put our finger on about what this is.
There's more to it. I'd be interested in hearing, somebody who can navigate that, kind of dig into it and see if they can't, figure it out a little bit better.
Yeah. So you think I got through all the new news. Was there anything I missed?
I don't think so.
Uh, so where do you think this is going?
Huerman's still on suicide watch, I assume. I don't know what they're going to do with them after this. Apparently, before he was arrested, they'd figure out housing accommodations for him. He's clearly as high profile as you get. And on top of that, he's, potential sexual predator. You can't put him in general population. You fucking can't. So I don't know if he's still on suicide watch or when he gets off of it. I don't know where they're going to put him, but apparently they know. And then it's going to take a while for things to. We'll get bits and pieces, scattered here and about for the next. Who the fuck knows? Could be a couple years or whatever. But
yeah,
this dude's never going away. He's in the books with the worst of the worst.
there was an interview with one of the other inmates at that prison, and I just read it yesterday, I guess. Anyway, he said that none of them like him. Any crimes against women or kids, they obviously don't like those offenders. They said that his life is in danger if he gets into GP. And the other thing he said in the interview is that anytime he moves right now in prison, everything's on lockdown. If he goes to the yard for fitness, if he goes to the bathroom, wherever he goes, everybody goes in their cell. Everything's on lockdown.
I believe it. That dude is super high profile, and they're not gonna fucking take a chance.
No.
Kim Cooper Calta-Jerome said, I heard that when Rex was young, kids teased him by calling him Herman Monster, if you're old enough to know who Herman Munster was. I have to admit, this made me sad. It's interesting that his house is so dilapidated now. It was like a prophecy. Yeah, I mean, you look into his background, he was bullied, excluded. It's one of those chicken or the egg things, right? Is it like something was always off about him and people picked up on it and they just saw what was coming? Or was it there was a chance for him to maybe not be normal, but not be a serial murderer, and certain things that happened to him because of a multitude of factors made things worse for him, right? I mean, if we're talking about someone who's powerless, who builds their sexuality around power over other people, and that person themselves is bullied, you can see a link there. Then there are lots of people who are bullied that don't do that, and that's always the important counter argument.
Yeah, I think I can't think of any serial killers who absolutely, became sexual sadistic psychopaths or anything in the regards of what Rex Huerman was doing because they got bullied when they were children. There's always much more to it. There's always different factors, and the different factors play different levels of roles. And I've learned that over the years. And who knows what role bullying played. But it's that for people to say, oh, he was bullied when he was a kid. So fucking what?
No,
So
was anyone
what?
not bullied?
Yeah. I
You
was
know, it's
bullied.
a good
I bullied other kids, like in
right, and
night
that's the
out
other
fucking
side of
slaughtering
the
sex
coin,
workers.
right? Is like we all bullied someone at some point, and we all were bullied. Now there's degrees of it, right? There's a lot of that stuff you just got to shake off because you just realize, hey, that happened to everyone. It's part of the human condition. You know, it's one of those things we hope we can do better as a species. Um, but yeah, but at the same time, you know, just because we all went through it too, maybe we're more psychologically resilient than Rex Sherman. I'm not saying that bullying made him a serial killer, but
Right.
bullying does make you feel small and it does make you feel helpless. And particularly when you don't have any social skills too, which he also seemed to lack. Right. So there's this guy probably thinking, I'm a loser. I'm an outcast. I can't get out of this situation. And a lot of people have been there, but you can see how that with then given certain other psychological factors that could go into like, no woman would like me unless I tied her up. And then that's what he's masturbating to. And then it's like, you know, and I still don't feel secure, but if she was afraid of me, I'd feel more secure. And if I was really big, which I am, and but she has to be smaller. So this is where I'm going with it. It's not, he didn't get bullied and become a serial killer, but those things can play into the way that people's sexual fantasies evolve.
Right. So to show a direct link to that, similarly, Joel Rifkin, you know, that had the isolation and all that, and due to that, and not having, you know, the tremendous social life and whatnot, he starts digging into the fantasies and digging into the fantasies and digging into the fantasies, and then it starts to, you know, so could does bowling play? Yeah, in some way, I'm sure it does. Is it like significant? Probably not. You know, I don't think. I think you just said, Lee, like he's not. I don't think he's modeling any victim types off of, you know, girls who bullied him and.
Yeah, probably not girls, but the thing that made people bully him is probably what made people reject him too. So whatever factor that was really not under his control, if we're going to be honest, it's not like you're a kid and you're aware of what's wrong with you and you can pull out the parts and fix it, right? So whatever it was about him that made that happen would also, you know, cause people to reject him and probably isolate him and treat him badly, right? And so then he's isolated and his sexuality is blooming. And what do you do with that? I want that so badly. I'm evolutionarily primed to want that more than all other things, but I can never get it because I'm that her human monster guy, right? And so what do you do with your sexuality at that point? You fantasize. Everyone has sexual fantasies, but in your fantasy, like how do you play a role in it? Knowing like when your self-image is that low, when your self-esteem is not just talking like low self-esteem, we're talking like it's bottomed
See,
out.
what's interesting? What's interesting about Rifkin's fantasies, and this plays almost directly in what you're just saying, Lee, is that he his fantasies were not like overtly sexual or violent. I mean, more so sexual, but like you said, hormones and what have you. And his fantasies would start off being gladiatorial, women fighting over him, sometimes to the death, sometimes to submission, but they're fighting over him and they're fighting for
That sounds
him.
like a high self-esteem fantasy.
Right. And Joel Rifkin, I mean, you know, in his head, he's got these, you know, women ready to kill each other for him. And then violence is there now, you know.
Was Joel Rifkin a sexual sadist? I always
No.
thought it was. Yeah. So what was his deal?
Seems to be, I want to say impulsive, because he said himself there would be nights where he would see like two or three girls and wouldn't kill any of them, or would go a little while and wouldn't kill any. And then when they asked him like, "Why? What made you came?" He's just like, "I don't know. I just." So it's hard to say if an impulse came over him and he just needed to strangle them in that moment, or something happened, or I don't know that he's the compulsive, you know, build the bloodlust builds and then the release. I don't know that that's the case with him, but he's an interesting one. But yeah, that's like Huerman, you know. I don't think Rifkin was bullied per se, more so than probably excluded, and
Ex-
he just didn't feel like he fit in.
But
You
he
know?
didn't. It wasn't a feeling, right? It was a fact.
Right.
Right.
Right. No, you're right.
So there's a lot of people that deal with being outcast. But I think that when you already have some bad things that you're born with, maybe your family environment is a little off too, not necessarily. And you take that person and you put them in a situation where they are excluded and bullied and laughed at. Those effects can take a different form sometimes. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can see elements of the recipe starting to come out little by little, and we got to start figuring out if they fit, where they fit, how they fit, the significant. I think, and I think people enjoy doing that. I hate to say that because it sounds so morbid, but I think that's another reason why the case has so much sensationalism and whatnot. I think people want to play detective.
And do you guys think that, like you just said about Rifkin, do you think that Heuermann solicited sex on a regular basis, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah,
only
I think it was.
periodically murdered?
Obsessively. Yes.
I think
Obsessively.
hypersexual.
Yes.
Yeah. What he probably did was to get over his low self-esteem. He was probably had a high sex drive anyway, and he learned to cope with the pressures and stresses of his life, like being excluded and bullied, basically by jerking off, right? So he started to and then having these violent fantasies. So he conditioned himself, um, to get this dopamine hit and this sexual release in response to any pressures in his life, and then it became it's an addiction at that point. And so as long as the sex drive stays high, he's got to always be doing this.
It seems like something he's kind of nurtured, grown. Usually you have, I don't want to say criminal escalation, but deviant escalation, antisocial things. It's not necessarily criminal. They're not necessarily breaking the law or harming people, but they're doing things that, like shouldn't be doing, and they build, and usually there's a track record of it of some sort, and they used to have the some people still believe it, the McDonald triad, and the warning signs, and but
window peeping, right? Window peeping, flashing, stalking people, exercising petty power over people at work, smashing someone's, retaliations against neighbors for things that you should just really let go.
Yeah, giving the dog antifreeze because it was barking.
Yeah, but also like Doug did ask just about using prostitutes regularly, I guess, right? And yeah, I mean that's the hypersexual part. It'd be interesting to know what those consensual scenarios were like. Was he kinky or was he boring? That's the thing about Cottingham. Richard Cottingham had a lot of lovers, and they said, well, Richie was kind of boring in bed. Well, but then with his victims, whether there's rape victims or homicide victims, he's like this paraphilic beast.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, I don't know, because arguably like this sexual cubing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But go ahead, Doug.
No, I was just gonna say that, I don't want to bring the wife into this at all, but I understand that people can have multiple lives and they can keep it from their loved ones, but I wonder if she knew, if he was obsessed with sex and solicited, sex from prostitutes on a regular basis, whether she knew about that or not. And I mean, there are relationships where people know that their significant other does that and they let it go, or they're okay with it, or they don't mention it, but
they don't talk about it, but it works for both of them. You're not always bothering me. You keep out of the house because you're annoying, frankly, right? and then you get to go off and do, maybe they have this sexless relationship. Wouldn't be surprised. You find it quite a bit. Yeah. Yeah, we don't know. It's possible too she had no idea. Like psychopaths are very good at identifying people who are easy to manipulate and easy to pull the wool over their eyes, right? And there are people like that. They're just personality types. So I think it's probably high agreeableness is probably the most predictable social trait of that, I think.
And the one thing, I agree. And the one thing that kind of the one question I have as well is, coming back to the burner phones, I think they said there were 7, and if I'm not mistaken, and last time I was on your show, Lee, I mentioned that there's probably an element to that where he's hiding it from his wife, and I still think that there is an element to that, but the other element to the burner phones is you're not hiding soliciting sex from law enforcement with a burner phone, because law enforcement doesn't care enough, or do they have the grounds to go and search a phone number to find out if you're a John, right? So you're doing something more than just soliciting sex. So if he's still got burner phones up to 2023,
I think
there's grounds there to investigate, obviously, homicides up to now, up to when
he's calling the victims' families. He's using them for escort services, but also probably for pornography sites, right? Anything that would require some kind of telephone authentication. He's probably
a lot of those burner phones. You can't even do that, though. I don't know what kind of burner phone he had, but accessing the internet, I don't know. Some you can, some you can't, I guess. But
yeah, it's a good question. Keeping his life in little boxes, right? Like I have a different phone for a different thing. This here, Facebook user said his solicitation seemed a little old school, burner phones and back pages. I wonder if he will have the online presence someone like Silver Fox did. So Bruce MacArthur. Yeah, he used Tinder as well. That's another thing they used it for. So now you bring that up. He used Tinder as well. So dating sites. Hook up.
I'd imagine he was looking at him all the time, whenever he could. He's got an itchy nutsack, but he's giving a speech on stage and he can't scratch his balls in front of everybody, so he keeps it in check. But when he goes backstage, he starts to scratch his nuts like crazy. And I think that's how he was with his burner phones. I think whenever he could whip them out, he was, even if he wasn't soliciting or trolling per se, he was, I'm sure, because porn was such a fucking big thing to him, obviously. I think at the very least he was, looking at them or obsessively just like checking it out and, what do I got to work with and getting ready for the next one. And,
it's like being able to keep your BTK part of you in your pocket,
right,
while you're Dennis, right? Or in this case, keep the LISK part of you in your pocket when you're Rex,
right?
And so you just dip into it for a second. And we talk about burners. Were these old school phones like flip phones? Anyone know that?
So.
They're generally basic, just voice and text, generally. And they're pay as you go. But like the interesting thing about the 7 burner phones, there's been a lot of speculation. Is there 7 victims? Is it 7 different locations? It's, if you're not being caught, there's no reason to switch. I think the burner phones are gonna, when more information is exposed, it's gonna produce a better timeline and possibly a cooling off period. And the reason I say that is because most burner phones deactivate after 120 days of no use. So does he have that cooling off period and he doesn't use the burner phone and now he's got to go get a new one? So I just think there's more to the burner phones. I have no idea what that is yet, but
what was he doing before the burner phones, before that technology?
So pre 21st century.
Basically that's the real question. And you have at least one victim whose remains are from 1996 in that area. I think it was Fire Island Jane Doe or one of the Jane Does.
He would have.
Could have been
He,
looking them up in the newspaper, in the classifieds, and then using a payphone, right? So
right, but to your point, Doug, he if he did go through a time where he didn't have them, it would be easy for him to put it away for a bit because it's not like he's always had this thing.
yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
he would have been 18 in 82, which was the year that I was born.
Well,
So he's a fully sexual adult being with probably with access to a car then. And so, does he seem like with his porn consumption, the things he was looking for, does he seem like he's someone that started in the 2000s? I think that would be rare. Maybe he didn't go full tilt until then, but
right.
you find that a lot with like serial killers. They'll have one or two earlier ones, and then they stop for a long time. Dahmer was like that. Ridgway had that little Robert Yates. Yes, you're right. The double homicide. There was that little boy that Gary Ridgway stabbed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it could be that that the dam didn't burst, but there was a little breach of the dam early on,
Mm-hmm.
and he really, that's maybe got married then, right? He got married in 90. Now I'm going to be normal, right? Put myself together, and then as age creeps in, those restraints come undone, and
right. But also the burner phones make it more accessible. They make it so he doesn't have to control it. You know what I'm saying? He just has to have the convenience of time to get on his burner phone, and it's that simple. If he was working harder than that before, if he was trolling streets, going to the tracks and stuff, looking for women, that who knows? We don't know what he was doing, but I'm sure significantly harder than picking up a fucking burner phone, pushing a button on back page. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I'd really love to know about what he was up to before he could have really been dependent on the burner phones, and I think he was.
Yeah, I'm so torn as to whether it was more personal for him, kind of having that secret life, or something to do with keeping it from the marriage, as opposed to a forensic countermeasure. Because if he did the research to find out a burner phone and and see what it could do, yet he's still carrying around his phone while using the burner phone, and his phone's on, which is how in the end they caught him. And they've traced his burner phone with his phone everywhere it goes. So if he's done that research, why didn't he know about, hey, I got to turn my phone off while doing this? I don't know.
Well, what did we come up with
point.
last time? Lebowski's razor.
Yeah.
If laziness explains it,
Yeah.
that's a good explanation. It is, I think. I mean, we all know that,
It
right?
really is, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's all. That's all it might be.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so I guess we're just about done. There's not just going to be 3 or 4, right? I would feel really strange if that's all there was.
I highly, highly doubt it.
Yeah.
To what extent, I have no fucking clue. I don't know, but to say that he just killed these 4 women. 3 technically he's being charged with.
We'll charge him with the Brainerd Barnes one.
Yeah. He'll get it eventually, but even if they have a circumstantial case, that's going to be a strong fucking circumstantial case. So he'll get it eventually. But to say he did these 4 and that was it for him, no fucking way. No way.
I think there's likely more, but I think after those 4 were discovered, he would have likely switched both dump site and MO. MO in terms of body dumping the bodies. Yeah.
So that's where the details of the crime actually do matter, and they're saying that the bodies were highly decomposed, and that's a problem, because if the bodies were more intact, we'd have more of an idea of what his signature was, and his
Right.
signature will be consistent even when the MO is changes. Right? You know, he had things on his searches like that's probably the worst thing I read was cut off pussy lips. You know, so genital mutilation. So if that occurred, could they tell if the bodies were I don't know how badly decomposed they were.
I think they were just bones.
Because if you had something like that, and then you know you could look for it elsewhere, it's not going to change. Might escalate.
There's as much as we will learn, which I don't know how much that'll be, but I think a huge, like a nice chunk of the picture of the missing puzzle is with him and him only. And if he doesn't talk, there's a lot of shit we're never gonna know.
So what do they have to incentivize him to talk? You know, this is an argument for the death penalty, right? You can go this or cooperate.
Right, but there's no death penalty anymore.
There's no death penalty. So
So
what do you use?
Custody level
Ego.
or yeah, there you go. You can try and coax it out of them, you know, and do it the old fashioned way, or you know, whatever. He's a serial killer. He wants what's good for him. So if he can get like a cozier cell or something, or better arrangements in some way, I mean, who knows? We don't. Who the fuck knows what's going to make that dude come off of it? He could. I could see him being one who, you know, I don't know that he'll like never talk about it and deny it forever, but being like the Gacy tongue in cheek, like, I was operating a cemetery without a license, you know, saying it but not saying it, or things like that. I've talked to a lot of them that are like that. I can see him being like that, or eventually, yeah, he'll just say, you know what, fuck, you know, you got me. I ain't going nowhere. This is what's up, and this is how I am.
When was the last time you saw an interview with a convicted serial killer behind bars? Is it just because I don't have TV that there don't seem to be any new ones, or has the culture gone to a place where people don't demand that now?
There's with a serial killer, the I want to say probably like it's not recent.
Right.
Maybe like 5 or 6, 7 years ago. I remember seeing a interview with Gary Ray Bowles. I can't. I mean, like it's really not that prevalent anymore. And that's another thing is why, you know, this is, I think this young generation who's getting all the Dahmer shows and the Bundy shows and all that. This is their first, you know, not first, but this is like a Dahmer and a Bundy. This is a, you know, this is their serial killer, you know. So
yeah, I mean the whole culture around the consumption of crime content has totally changed too. You know, if you go back to the 20th century, it was very popular, but it was like an underground thing. You know, regular people. I wouldn't say regular. It wasn't a channel for it on TV, right? There wasn't true crime podcasts and everything.
No true crime books section, you know.
Yeah, and it was really small though, Chris. I mean, it was really small up until the last time I went into a bookstore, because obviously I've had true crime books published, and you know it got down to it was like 3 shelves at some point in time. They were selling those little paperbacks like Pinnacle, True Crime. Those you could get them for like $8.
I remember you used to have to get those books in the society and culture section. Like there was no true crime.
There was no true,
and the genre didn't exist. I was getting Clifford Linedecker books from Society.
Clifford Linedecker, yeah. So I'm talking about the old G's, right? That's what I'm saying. It's not the same. People talk about their true crime podcast, and I'm like, you don't have a true crime podcast. You have a podcast that comments on crime. True crime in its original form, that's like Vincent Bugliosi, Helter Skelter. It's Truman Capote in Cold Blood. These are highly fictionalized, stylized accounts of of popular crimes. They have no journalistic integrity, really. No.
All three of us, you know, we saw the Bundy shit. I watched Bundy's execution on the news, you know, here in Florida. We saw the Danny Rolling shit, though. Like, you know, all the big serial killers. Like, we were here for them, and all these young people, they see them, and then now they're seeing a real one right in front of them. You know what I'm saying? And they cannot extract everything fast enough, and they cannot be nosy enough. And it's like that's and it's kind of stoking that fire, and it makes, you know, people just can't get enough of this case.
It's always been that way, though. You go back to medieval times, people were fascinated with murderers. Why wouldn't you be fascinated with murderers? It doesn't make them good. It doesn't make what they did not wicked and evil, but you know, it's a major event, right? We could all see ourselves being the victims of murderers, and people we love being victims of murderers. And then there's like this other part, which is darker even, you know, where you go, could I be a murderer? Yeah, well, that's a question everyone should ask themselves, seriously, right?
Yeah, Kim saying I'm not old enough to have seen Ted Bundy's execution. Thank you.
Yeah,
I was 5. Yeah, my parents had it on the news. I grew up in Florida, so
I remember I used to live in California, and they used to have executions on TV. They'd advertise the date and time. I don't know if it was pay-per-view or whatever it was.
No.
Like, I don't know. I was like grade 1 or 2, but I remember they'd come up in the TV guide or whatever. Yeah.
Could you imagine, like, with YouTube,
I don't know what the context was.
With YouTube, where you have, what is it, where you pay money to get your comment appear? Yeah, you could do that with like an execution, like and Dave in Minnesota has donated $25 to this execution, and fry you prick. Wow. Yeah. I'm not going to do it, but I have a huge library of true crime books out here, and I feel almost like I want to go get the most sordid ones and take them out and go, remember when the true crime used to be like this? There was a time when there was a thin line between true crime and softcore pornography. There was.
Yeah, no, it was definitely I want to say, yeah, more in your face graphic and what have you.
But it had a feeling like you know, it had a smell to it. Like you could only order this book from the back of a magazine, or you had to go to, like, you know, a bin in a shop somewhere with a really seedy guy in leather.
A seedy element about it.
Yeah, there was, and it made it a little bit more. It made it feel like it was a bit more yours and yours alone, rather than now everyone's into it. I'm getting bored of it. It's like, okay, you're all into true crime. I'm going to go do something else. I liked it better when it was my little thing.
I think the you know what to say though is that Heuermann's, like, his name's not going anywhere. He's in there, and he's on the list now with all the rest of them, you know, and it'll keep getting brought up, and he'll, you know, he's the boogeyman now, and that's what he wanted. So
there you go. Excellent closer, Chris. We were talking about that at the beginning. Wanted to be the big monster that scares little people, and congratulations, man. You know, now you get to live the rest of your life in a cage.
Yeah. Deservedly so.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so I think we'll wait quite some time now. There would have to be a lot of news before I do this again, and I think it would be something like another victim. I don't even know if charges in Brainerd Barnes would merit it, because we all know those are coming. Yep. Those are coming. So have to be like they've linked them to totally other sets of victims, or if they reveal like what they've got in his house,
which I think will come out in bits and pieces slowly. I don't think they're going to be like, here it is, you know.
Yeah, they've really kept the lid on this overall. So
I think they're going to continue to do that and just kind of, you know, leak it out, and then, you know, whenever court comes around, I don't know if there will be a trial or what, but people are going to get as much as they can out of this. They're going to get all the information that they can weasel out of any facet of this for whatever they use it for. Money, I don't know.
Facebook user said maybe the murders in I think it's supposed to be Vegas. They link him for. Thank you guys for this insight. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us. Yeah, I don't know. I think more murders are going to be around New York, New Jersey. I think that's where they're realistically going to find them. There could be them in Vegas and South Carolina, but I think if they are, unless there's a trove somewhere, they're not going to be able to link them to them. I think it's going to be East Coast stuff.
They did say that they are keeping the task force together, and they're going to continue to search Long Island for remains. So there you go.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Good idea. Okay, I will say before I go to my other show, Citizen Detective, we are investigating like 17-ish crimes in Oklahoma, and we're actually investigating them. We're working with the police. So we're talking about homicides that are overlooked. These are very overlooked. And we did the first episode. Was it today? Thursday? No, today's Wednesday. We did the first episode yesterday. We already have a wallet we can test for DNA. So we need your funds to be able to do that testing. That's all that money goes to. So if you could check that out, that would be cool. There's a GoFundMe page. Of course, I don't have the link right now. But
Citizen Detective, GoFundMe. There you go.
It's a really long link. It's like GoFundMe/F/Delaware County Delaware County Homicide Fund. Yeah.
Let's make this as difficult as possible.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. But yeah, Doug, we got to get you involved in that.
Yeah, definitely. Just I meant to tune in last night. I just didn't get around to it with the kids, but I'll go through those cases, and whichever case that you think is
so a lot of
set of skills, I'm happy to be involved.
A lot of doper murders seemingly right now. People killed in trailers and set on fire, kind of thing. So, all right. Thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Doug. If your murder was the case patron, I'll chop this up into audio pieces and put it up there for you. And thank you for being a patron of the show. If you're not, thanks for tuning in. Anyways, back with more Rex Heuermann when there's actually something substantial to talk about later.